to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming by.
Yeah, it's good to be here, man.
It has. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but it was exactly 3 years ago this month that we did this the last time.
That's wild.
It was October of 2017.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Man, it feels like 9 months ago.
I know it does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
It was 3 years. And I was looking through my notes on that, and the last time we did the podcast, because of that podcast, I was off of Twitter for 2.5 years.
Wow.
I deleted my Facebook app from my phone, and I deleted the LinkedIn app, and I moved. It was funny. I have a special note. I moved the Instagram app to the top left corner of my phone, so it'd be harder to get to with my thumb.
That's brilliant.
Just that little small change.
Absolutely.
But I remember we talked a fair bit about social media, and it had an effect. So I don't know. Maybe we'll drop off of Twitter again after this podcast.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Actually, on that note, on social media note, I think I didn't do that just because we talked about social media. I feel like you were off of social media a lot of the time also. And I also remember you having either two phones or not having a smartphone, like switching back to like an old flip phone or something.
Yeah, for 13 months I had a flip phone.
Okay. So let me ask this then. So you went through a period of time where you had cut back on social media and just everything that goes with smartphones. But I see you were back to a smartphone. So how are you now thinking about social media and all of that? And I'm even particularly curious. I think you have teen kids. Is that correct?
Yes.
Like mid-teens?
I have 3 high schoolers and 1 9-year-old.
Okay. So I don't have any high schoolers. I have a 10-year-old. He's our oldest. So I'm curious, how are you dealing with social media now, and how are you dealing with it with the kids?
Yeah. I learned a lot through that 13 months of being on a flip phone, away from smartphone, limited tech. I basically limited social media to two ways of limiting it. One was only producing, not consuming.
Okay.
So there's usually 2 types of people on social media: the producers who disperse info, consumers who consume info.
Yes.
Scroll, mindlessly clicking. And so my strategy through that 13 months was one of the, well, not strategy, my takeaways was do more producing rather than consuming. And limit it to actual like computer time and not handheld computer in my pocket.
Yes.
So good boundaries, I believe.
Yep.
And man, the teenager years with social media. Wow, that's loaded. So all my 9-year-old has an old iPhone that is frustrating and slow and not connected, cellularly. And my 3 high schoolers, we text all the time. We communicate via text a lot, and there's tight boundaries.
Okay.
Very tight boundaries.
And what ages?
14, 16, 18.
14, 16, and 18. And boy, girl.
Boy, girl, boy. So girls in the middle at 16. Girls in the middle at 16, then boy 18, boy 14.
Okay, yeah, you have the range there. Okay, and they each have a smartphone, and they've got cellulars. They can call, they can text. Okay,
yeah.
And social media.
Yeah, they have. Let's see. Our oldest, our 18-year-old, has Instagram. Our 16-year-old has Instagram. Our 14-year-old boy, he just looks at stupid videos and follows sports.
Yeah.
So
he's probably happy with just YouTube, right?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Yeah. But it really became important for us because our kids are involved in sports. Despite the most, schools shut down in-person studying, our kids go to a school where, they've been at it since August, playing sports, involved in theater. Lot of extracurricular stuff. And I didn't like not being able to get a hold of my kids.
Right.
And of course the school violence, school shootings, different things. As a parent, that's a pros and cons type of idea. It's like, well, I'd rather my kid have a phone. I don't like all that comes with it.
Yep.
And a lot of times I feel like when parents don't want their kids to have a smartphone, I get it, but I think a lot of times it's because we would rather not parent. We'd rather just not have to worry about that.
Yeah.
in regards to that.
Right. That's an interesting philosophy, which I agree with, and we're trying to kind of grow in that area, which is instead of just, laying down some do's and don'ts, then talking through why some of those do's and don'ts matter, and I guess just growing the child as opposed to laying down the law so much, which is what you're saying, which is it's easier as a parent to just not have the smartphones, not have the social and the thing is, it's only a matter of when, right? I mean, it's not like you can, at some point, they make their own decisions, and it doesn't matter what you say, they're going to have Instagram, right? I mean, that's whatever age that is, 21, 18, whatever. So what you're taking the approach, though, is those things are out there. Society's already using them. Let's coach them and teach them and train them into how to use it and how to use that in a wise way and not let it own or control them. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely.
Which I agree. Yeah, totally agree.
I think it's wise. For us, that's the path we're taking. The conversation when I was growing up in the 80s was like alcohol, is it okay to drink? Is it okay not to drink? And,
yes.
And as I grew up in that subculture, independent, fundamental, Baptist, woods of the mountains of North Carolina.
Yeah.
King James only.
Okay.
1611. But
what's 1611?
The AV 1611.
What is that?
That's the Bible that Paul carried. Just joking.
Oh, okay.
That's the authorized version.
Gotcha.
But no one, very few people carry the 1611. Most people carry the 1769, but they claim it's 1611.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that people get so sidetracked
with
that whole discussion. But anyway, what I learned in looking back over my childhood in regards to alcohol was, it's a lot easier, a lot cleaner, a lot simpler just to say no to something.
Yep.
Rather than learning self-control and discipling someone, a friend, maybe an older child who's a young adult, like teaching them through the self-control behind something that could be terrible, but also could be enjoyable. And so I think the cancel culture has been around much earlier than 2020.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
And I think that applies to smartphones and kids too, is just let's keep our kids pure, which is beautiful. Let's keep them unstained from the world. Man, that's beautiful. But if it's just to think that they're never, ever going to choose differently as they age, then you're not really teaching them self-control.
Yeah.
You're not teaching them wisdom. I mean, I love that my kids and we get to work through boundaries and limits and wisdom. And, they have to ask to purchase things. They have to ask for screen time because everything's set at 5 minutes. And if they, per day, per app.
5 minutes per day per app.
Yeah. And if they want more time, they have to ask for it.
I
can approve, I think 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or all day, something like that.
Oh, is there a particular app that you download that controls the apps, or it's just honor system?
No, it's on the what do you call it? We're all on the same iCloud account.
Okay, yeah.
And so I get to, from my phone, I can see their activity, and I can set some apps just off. So when their grades begin to drop, I didn't
know you could do that.
I just shut off their phone except text and call.
The screen time app that comes on every iPhone,
there
right?
You go. Yes.
Yeah.
The screen time app, you can, in the general settings, you can set on your own phone also? Or
every phone that's tied to the iCloud account.
You can set a per day amount of use time for, say, Instagram.
Yep.
My
the
wife
app.
has that too.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
I've never heard of
my
that.
wife Jill uses it for herself and just puts limits, and it just says time up, and it's got an hourglass.
Okay.
And, you can click to put in a password to redo it. Of course, she knows her own password, but she kind of has it there to keep her accountable. Wow, I've already spent 45 minutes on this thing today.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you have the ability to dictate how much time each of your kids spends on each of the apps, because you could have 5 minutes on Instagram and 10 minutes on Facebook, presumably?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you can do that. And then, fascinating. And then Is that actually the time that you allow them? Because that seems extremely short.
Well, it was 1 minute because grades were really low.
Okay.
And so they kind of have to earn trust, right? Like
Okay.
through trust, they earn extra time. And, you know, I don't want to give them too much freedom or things to enjoy if they can't handle it responsibly, right? And so when their grades are up, I bump that time up without even really telling them. But then once their grades begin to change or behavior begins to shift, I pull it back down, you know, and I tell them. And then we talk about kind of what's been going on, what's influencing them, what's going on with their grades. And then, as they prove they can handle those things, we increase it.
And they cannot extend their own time without your permission, and you have the password that they don't have, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's remarkable. But by still giving them 1 minute or 5 minutes, that allows them to go in, check comments, check notifications, messages, that type of thing, make sure they're not missing something that they shouldn't.
Right, yeah. And if they're waiting for us to pick up, you know, like after practice, if they get out of practice early and I'm on my way, but it's like 15 minutes. Like my daughter Bethany asked me last week, she sent me a text saying, "Can I have extra time while I wait for you?" I'm like, "Sure," you know.
I see.
And so I approved a request for 15 more minutes.
Wow.
But again, that's a lot more engagement. That's not sending my kid away and then I'm doing my thing throughout the day and then I begin parenting at supper time.
Yes.
You know, it's a lot of, even throughout the day, connecting.
I like that. Yeah, you're in each other's lives more, partly because of the, navigating that issue together. It allows more points of contact and more conversations between you and the kids, which is great. And that's really interesting. I didn't know, but I'm also fascinated by your comment that the cancel culture is not new, that has been around. And you're right about that. And I think there's still, I'm quite sure, I guess, although I'm sure there is. There's still people today that like en masse would still like not drink any alcohol, which is totally fine. I have zero problem with that whatsoever. But then there's a whole bunch of people that maybe in the 80s, their denomination or their camp or whatever, their affiliation, their culture would have said, no alcohol. But now they're enjoying alcohol, but they're doing it responsibly and wisely, and would still probably believe you can take alcohol too far and use it inappropriately and all these types of things. But they're starting to navigate the wise use of that as opposed to canceling it out altogether, right?
Yeah, it takes wisdom. It takes self-control.
Yeah.
But you don't need self-control or wisdom if you just cancel it.
Yeah.
But that's usually within that subculture, there's usually people who abuse food.
Yeah.
And they don't cancel that.
Right.
And if you struggle with food, they don't just tell you to stop eating the rest of your life.
Yes.
It does take discipleship. It takes face time. It takes self-control.
Yes.
It takes discipline. And those things are hard and it's difficult.
Yes.
It's a lot of responsibility to try to learn self-control, teach self-control, grow in self-control.
Yep.
It's all, it's all consuming, really.
Mm-hmm. And that's where but you're doing some real work at that point. Like if you're helping a child grow in those areas, now what's the saying? Like now you're no longer like giving a man a fish, you're teaching him how to fish, basically. You know what I mean? Like now you're moving from do's and don'ts to being able to discern your own path forward as your own person, which is really, that is parenting, right? As we do that and point them to God. That's the hard work of parenting right there.
And that's what we want, like when our kids leave home. We want to know that they have proven themselves over the years to be able to handle this.
Yes.
They understand the way of wisdom. It's not just dropping off at college with an unfiltered internet, unfiltered, uncontrolled phone. Who knows what influences? Who knows? Like, we haven't taught them how to think. We've only told them what to know, right?
Yes. Yes. Oh, man.
And so they've got to think. We haven't prepared them at all to think. And that's a frightening
that
thought.
is.
One of the cool things our school that my kids go to offers in regards to social media, I thought this was brilliant, is they offer a social media class. And it's twofold. One, it teaches the marketing side of social media. And then two, the foolishness of social media and its dangers of what you do now as a teenager and we see this with sports figures, coaches, politicians, it's going to come back around one day.
I see.
You need to be very careful in what you put out there.
Yes.
And because the internet is permanent. You know?
Yes, it really is. Yeah.
And then one thing, my 14-year-old boy, we're big Clemson fans. Love Clemson football, Dabo, all that.
Go Tigers, right? My
it.
brother would be a fan
Living
of
in
all
your
that.
golden age.
Yeah.
Man, we suffered for years.
Yeah.
It's been really awesome here lately. But, he went to his football camp, and Coach Sweeney just uses football to teach kids about Jesus. And it's amazing, man. It's like Jill called it, because she was able to go to camp with him. Football VBS is what she called it. Vacation Bible School.
Yep.
But something that's interesting that he told all the campers was in regards to social media, and how anyone he's interested in recruiting to play football, he begins every Tuesday. It's every Tuesday or every other Tuesday. He gets a written manifest, a report of any junior or senior in high school that they have their eye on, all their questionable social media posts and interactions. And then he goes through that list and contacts them regarding their post, saying, hey, if you want to play football for us, you have to clean this stuff up. So he's already changing these young men before they're even in his program, because he looks at it as just mentoring men. And a number of coaches look at it that way, probably a majority of them. But he's wanting a certain type of player, not just a good athlete. It's not just what you do, it's who you are.
Wow.
And so he's trying to go ahead and go upstream before they get to the program, protecting them in a lot of ways from a lot of trouble, because, man, social media is it can be easily problematic.
For sure. And to be clear, this is Coach Sweeney is doing that for your 14-year-old son who is in football camp?
No. He was explaining how he does this.
He does it with his
campers.
players?
Yeah, and potential players. But he was just telling the campers, this is important.
I see.
How you handle social media.
Yep.
And then he was using that as an example of what he looks for. So it was to create this better care with the internet and these young guys.
So you think currently, though, Dabo Sweeney is getting a report every Tuesday with his current players and maybe those that want to play Clemson football, and someone's having to make the decision on what's a questionable social media post and what's not. But the ones that clearly are totally fine, he's not necessarily reviewing those. The ones that are questionable, he's reviewing. Then he's sitting down and having a brief conversation with that young man and saying, "Here's how." Oh, that's
But now I wouldn't say it's
cool.
current players. I think current players, I don't even know if they are allowed to have phones or social media during the season.
Okay.
I'm sure there's some freedom there, but they have that locked down really tight. It's the juniors and seniors around America that he's got his eye on as far as recruitment goes. It's only those prospects.
Fascinating. It's quite a level of involvement, but I can see the wisdom in it. And just so we don't pass over it, your 14-year-old son went to Clemson and was in a football camp?
Yeah.
Wow,
He's
that's
got
cool.
great hands.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Has
Hunter Renfro, he caught the pass.
The pass.
Andrew probably knows. I don't recognize
when
that
they beat
name.
Alabama, number 13, little white boy caught it in the end zone.
I don't recall.
1 second left.
1 second left.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Which year?
That would have been 18,
16.
17?
2016, Tampa
It would
Bay.
have been January
of 17.
Of 17, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So we weren't there at that game. But anyway, he's a family friend. So we vacation with his family every summer.
Oh, cool.
So he was hanging out, throwing football he's from a large family. Okay. So his uncle was my roommate in college. So I've known Hunter since he was like 4 years old. Taught him everything he knows about football.
Right. Naturally.
Not zero, actually. But he was throwing, and he looked at my college roommate and was like, man, this kid has great hands, So Caleb, my son, thinks just because he can catch, that's going to make him a great ball player.
Sure.
But you have to have good footwork to get you to where you can catch.
Yeah.
And you have to know the route and have to run the route. And that's what makes Hunter a good ball player. And that's why he's playing for the Raiders, and doing a great job. Yeah, fantastic.
So he got into the NFL.
Oh, yeah, he's doing fantastic.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
But it's his footwork that gets it for him, his route running. So that's what I'm trying to teach my boys. Like, man, you're slow.
Yeah.
You got to speed up. You got to work these routes. You can catch, but there's not many people that get paid just to go walk out there and turn around and catch a ball. It's usually a lot more involved.
Yeah. And Caleb is your son, and he's the one that's 14 now, and he's the one that went to this camp. Is he going to go every year, or was that a one-time thing?
Canceled this year.
Okay.
Of course, with COVID stuff. But yeah, he wants to go back, and he gets to go with my college roommate's son.
Okay.
Kyle Renfro and his son. And they have a lot of fun together.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Back to kids and social media. Do you have an internet filter at home, or do you just have straight internet? How do you handle that?
Our router is straight internet,
Okay.
but everything connected to it has filters on it. Even our Netflix, anything.
Okay.
You have to have.
So like the filter is in, like you would go into like Netflix settings and do some sort of a filter there within Netflix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything that is R or above. You have to put in a code.
Yep.
And I know that code. Nobody else knows that code.
Like the 4-digit code on Netflix. We have that too. Yeah. We have, our oldest is 10. So if something is PG-13 or worse, I think they need a code. I think they might know the code, but they're young enough. It's like they don't, that stuff would be boring to them. So we haven't really had to deal with that. But it's something that Mariana has brought up a couple of times, is like internet blockers and stuff like that, filters, and we just have straight internet. And I definitely have my share of sins and temptations, those types of things. Porn's not one of them, so it's not that I haven't kind of dealt particularly with that thing. And so I just remember internet filters from like when I was 18, it was awful. It was so awful. I mean, but it was dial-up internet, and you couldn't even go to like Google without the filter, causing a problem. And so I've been a little bit more maybe on hey, the kids are young and just not an issue, but I have been curious as they grow up is, what do we do about that? I like the strategy though of having the filters
on each one.
I
think we could do more. I'm with you in my experience on filters in the past. It gets clumsy and difficult. I'm sure it's not that way anymore.
Probably. You're probably right.
But I basically made it difficult to have low-hanging fruit, basically.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to get to something, you're going to find a way of getting to it.
Yeah. Exactly. That's my philosophy too.
And so I would rather take those opportunities and walk with my kids through them. So there's a lot of times my wife and I, I'm sure people won't like this, but our kids know, like, your phone is really ours. And we always have to have your passwords, and we're going to look at random times, through everything that we find, deleted pictures, history, or a clean history.
Yeah,
that's a concern.
Right. And
so and we just deep dive into their messages, text messages, social media history.
Yep.
And that's just a way of trying to learn their digital footprint. Yeah. And use that for teaching points and, being able to parent.
Yes.
In those situations.
Did I get it correct? You also have an 18-year-old son?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you have an 18-year-old son, 16-year-old daughter, 14-year-old son.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for the 18-year-old son, even the 14-year-old for that matter, are you seeing a difference with how guys and gals relate now as opposed to, how old are you?
I'm 41.
Okay, you're a little older than me, but still I feel like back when we were kind of growing up, it probably was pretty similar just as far as that day and age and everything. Are you noticing it's different now? And the reason I asked was, so our oldest is 10. He is in 5th grade, so he went into middle school this year, and he made there was one, I don't know, in the course of like a couple of days, he made 3 friends. One of them was a boy and 2 of them were girls, but they all kind of knew each other, and I think the girls actually emailed him wondering if they could be friends. And of course he was all about it because, this was all virtual. And now he's like, oh, he has friends from his school. And it really wasn't like a boyfriend girlfriend thing. And then, another boy. And so it wasn't, so he had some communication with these kids. And one of the girls was a little bit more, they both were a little bit more, I guess, proactive and more like overtly friendly. And he got a text message through Mariana, my wife's phone, and she had like created a video on TikTok. Like it was impressive. Like she was a very good dancer, and this video was impressive on TikTok. But we were both like, "Oh crap, what is going on?" Like we did not realize we were going to be dealing with this quickly. You know what I mean? And it kind of felt like back in my day, I guess, the girls tended to be a little bit more reserved, and it was the boys' role to pursue and to go after and, to kind of put yourself out there. And all of a sudden, we're experiencing a little bit different. We're like the girls are the ones going out, putting themselves out there and like being a little bit more aggressive and overt and direct and those types of things. And again, none of the above was inappropriate. But so then we started like asking around a little bit, and then there was another guy, Jason Rigel, who was on the podcast, and he said he thinks he has kids that I think he's got grown kids, but maybe his younger one is still up in teenage years, and he said he feels like it's switched where the girls are a little bit more now, I guess, proactive and stuff. How are you seeing this with your kids in high school?
Yeah, I could see that. My boys are just chill, kind of stay in their lane. I don't know that they walk in a room and try to be the big deal or wonder who is the big deal. They just go in, sit down, find their place, and get to work. I mean, they have fun, but like my 16-year-old girl, she is the life of the party. Like she's a blast. She is life-giving. Like she's just totally engaged. She's quick. Man, she's quick. She's real witty, she acts like she's 27, and she's 16. And my 14 and 18-year-old boy, my two boys, they probably act like a 12-year-old. I don't know.
Yeah.
It is different. Of course, girls mature, first and earlier. Yep. And so I see that. And I don't know, that probably has shifted as far as the ambition element goes. Like men, young boys back in our generations and times were probably more ambitious and confident maybe in some ways. And now they've maybe lost that confidence. Maybe they're, I don't know, there could be fear. I don't know what would be there. I haven't thought about that. But
I wonder if I haven't thought about that either. And I think this was also a point that Jason made, was that it's not an entirely bad thing that the girls are becoming a little bit more proactive, because maybe that's just them knowing their worth a little bit more and knowing who they are as a person, and they're confident in that, So I'm sure it depends individually, of course. But then also back to the boys, one thing they have to deal with growing up is the culture that does sort of press down masculinity and does sort of assume masculinity is toxic, which of course there is plenty of toxic masculinity out there, but not all masculinity is toxic, and so because I feel like that's a little different now, I don't know, I wouldn't know that it's an attack on manhood or anything like that necessarily, but I think it's different than it was growing up in the 80s and 90s now. So
yeah, a theory maybe, and just processing it here with you is, I wonder, like, when I look at my boys, I think when they're on technology, they're usually gaming. And when my daughter's on technology, she's usually engaging. Of course, you can engage in gaming, but usually it's 2 to 4 people. It's not getting a video together. It's not making a post on Instagram.
Yeah.
It's not texting back and forth with friends. The boys probably text very, very little. They very, very little social media of my 18-year-old, none for my 14-year-old. I would actually like for him to be on Instagram. I would like to see what he would post.
Yeah.
That would be fascinating. But my 16-year-old girl is very active.
Yeah. I can see that.
Good followers. Like it's and she's the one who took that social media class, and so she's really wise in how she uses,
Yeah.
how she has her online persona.
Yep.
So I wonder if that kind of carries into real life, into the classroom, for instance, where boys are kind of just in that room for 1 to 4 people, kind of like a game.
Yes.
And the girls are just more social
can
butterflies
see that.
because of that engagement that goes on back home while you're on social media.
That's a very interesting thought. I mean, gaming is such a big deal now for boys, and I just never got into video games. I mean, we were Mennonites, so we didn't have TVs, but we did have computers later and did play some computer games. But by that point, I was old enough, and I just never got into it. So with like our 10 and 8-year-old son, I mean, Xbox the thing. You know what I mean? Like they'll play Xbox over watching a movie, or I mean that's their thing. So do you have, say for like the 14-year-old, do you have an amount of time per day that you'll let him play the Xbox or video games?
Yeah, typically there's zero playing games during the week.
Okay.
And then on Saturday after 12.
Oh, okay.
And
Gotcha. Afternoon on Saturday.
That's for all the kids.
Okay.
Yeah, and without special permission, and that's very rare. And usually we look at their current GPA, their grades,
Okay.
their performance, and that's even before they even get to go play with the neighbors. It's like, hey, I want to go play basketball with the neighbors. I'm like, well, let's look at your grades. I mean,
I like that.
we're tight. When you start thinking about paying for college for kids,
Right.
that GPA matters a lot.
Yeah, it does. How about Sundays? Any game time on Sunday, Xbox time or whatever?
Limited. I try to be chill and relax with my 18-year-old, more
Sure.
freedom. He works a lot, and he deserves to rest a lot on Sunday. And kind of let him just choose for himself.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm passive. It's just that I'm wanting him to kind of go ahead and kind of start living that college life of freedom.
Yes.
And then throw in kind of soft parenting nudges along the way.
Yep.
Without hard restrictions on like a 14-year-old.
Yeah, totally agree with that philosophy for sure. Well, thanks for indulging me on my curiosity on that. Like I said, the oldest is 10, so I'm all ears when someone has kids that are like your kids' ages.
Yeah.
How you handling the internet and social media and gaming and all of those things, man. I mean, it's becoming increasingly relevant, and we're into it now. I mean, he's getting a TikTok video that this girl put together.
Yeah.
Like it's
scares
happening.
Me. Yeah, TikTok stuff scares me. There's certain apps we just don't tolerate. We don't.
Yeah.
We don't have time for that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
can I ask you a question? I know it's your podcast.
Please.
Can I interview you about something? So you said you're Mennonite.
Yeah,
okay. Well, you were Mennonite.
Yep.
Where did you grow up?
Upstate New York.
Okay.
Yep. Grew up in upstate New York, and my wife was from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Okay. So she grew up Amish, like the legit Amish. And all of her siblings, she's from a family of 9. When they all turned 16, it wasn't exactly 16, but for most of them, when they turned 16, they left the Amish and then joined local Mennonite churches. So you have the Anabaptist umbrella, and in the Anabaptist, you have Brethren, you have Amish, you have Mennonites, and there's some more in there. And like you would know, the Anabaptists kind of broke out in the Great Reformation, and but her parents are still Amish. So when we started dating, that was I drove my Yamaha R6 crotch rocket into an Amish house, and in the driveway, and took off my leather stuff and walked into the house to date their daughter. And it was intimidating for me because even though I grew up Mennonite, the Mennonite and Amish kind of share a lot of the same theological beliefs, but I look like this. Like I legitimately look exactly like this. But the women would wear like dresses and veils and coverings and stuff like that. No TV, no radio, that type of thing. So yeah, it's what I knew my whole life. And then when we moved to Nashville in 2014, we were very open to the idea that when we moved down here, we may go ahead and leave that tradition. But the two decisions weren't necessarily tied together. The decision was we're going to move to Nashville. The likely scenario is that we'll probably leave that Mennonite culture as well, or tradition, but that wasn't a for sure. And after we were down here, we found our church and started to, get curious about what they believed. And And then probably in 6 months or so after we lived here, we decided to kind of leave the Mennonite tradition as well. So.
Yeah. And is it new order, old order, new school, old school?
Yeah. There's old order Amish, which is what you think of when you think of Amish. And there's new order Amish, which Mariana has a couple of siblings that I think would fall in that camp.
Okay.
Which means the husbands would largely look like me. The ladies would wear, dresses in a covering. And then, no TV, no radio. And like some of them would like drive cars that are only black.
Okay.
And not have like any other color of car.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's sort of a half step between Amish and Mennonite.
Yeah,
Yep.
and they would drive tractors instead of cars sometimes.
The new order Amish, I think mostly they are all having cars at this point,
Okay.
is my understanding. But then there is a type of, not to confuse the issue, but there is a type of like a horse and buggy type of Mennonite, which we had a lot of those where I grew up. Like Joe Wangers, what else are they called?
What were those baskets? The Longenmeyer baskets?
Longaberger baskets.
Longaberger
Yeah.
basket, that's right.
Why do you bring that up?
That was a product of the Mennonite and Amish.
Did they make?
I think
Did
so.
they make?
In the Shenandoah Valley.
Oh, I didn't
Virginia.
know that. So Longaberger, the reason I was curious why I brought that up, because my mom used to buy the crap out of those baskets. I mean, she was into collecting those big time.
And they were going to be really valuable one day.
They were? I don't think they are,
Well,
honestly.
they're as valuable as Beanie Babies and ball cards.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
We lived in the Shenandoah Valley for 3 years and had a lot of Mennonite friends.
Oh, yeah?
And brethren friends.
Really?
Near Sweetwater College, Bridgewater College, James Madison University, Eastern Mennonite University.
Oh, wow.
Right there in Harrisonburg.
Okay.
But wonderful people.
Wonderful.
Loyal people,
Yeah.
hardworking, honest.
Yep.
Man.
Family oriented.
Oh, yeah.
Most of, not all anymore, but most tend to have a little bit of more of an Arminian theology.
Sure.
And so we were definitely in that camp, and that kind of changed in like 15 for us. And, it's, look, there's lots of godly, great, smart people that would still fall in that Armenian camp and not have a lot of respect for that culture for sure.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me ask that. I just didn't, I just admire.
Upstate New York, and the families tend to be a little larger too. And I think where people go wrong is when people leave the Mennonites or the Amish, sometimes they leave because they're looking for, I guess, a freedom to go be wild and crazy. And then when they feel like they're treated different, or when they are treated different, because most people that do leave the Amish and Mennonite, they're going to be treated different. And you just have to know that going in and accept that and still agree to still love each other, even though you're going to be treated a little bit different. And I think that's the way to do it. But when you leave and there's sort of at least a level of animosity or a degree of separation that you weren't anticipating, and that creates a bitterness, now that's a problem. I mean, you can't live your life in bitterness, and you can't live your life. Also, here's the other thing, that when people leave those conservative circles, one of the things I think, probably mostly without exception, but that's an overstatement, I would think. But a lot of times they're told like, well, you guys are going to be fine, because we were told this, like, you guys will be fine because you're old enough. We were 30, but you're kids, So it's like they put that pressure. Not everyone, but you'll hear this, where you're going to be okay, but you're making the wrong decision because your kids are not going to be okay. Mm. Well, when you put that on a parent, that's not a good expectation to live under, And now you have this generation of parents that are feeling the need to parent in a certain way to prove to the people or the group that they left that that's not going to happen to their kids. And you know what happens? That happens to their kids. You know what I mean? So I think there's a right way and a wrong way to leave whatever culture or religion or kind of denomination you're from. If you leave it for good reasons, I think that's great. We're happy that we left. We won't go back. We're also very grateful for it. But we don't have any bitterness, and we don't feel like we have to live up to anyone's expectations. My wife probably does a little bit more than me, but I think where it goes wrong is when you start to feel like you're living under those expectations. You have something to prove. Mm-hmm. That's not a good situation to be in.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize you lived in the Northeast, actually, at any point. Were you married at that point?
Yes. Yeah, I had 2 kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. So you've also had COVID.
Yeah, man. Wow.
When was that? How'd you get it? How was that?
That was awful. It was a month ago, probably, maybe 4.5 weeks now.
Okay.
Yeah, it was terrible. Started feeling bad on a Monday morning. And, Sunday night, I didn't finish my supper. And that's only happened like never in my life, you know? And so it's like something, looking back, it's like, oh, wow, that's probably what it was. You know?
Okay.
Because I've just always cleaned your plate, right?
Yep.
And anyone else's. And so I went to bed that night, woke up the next morning, didn't feel great, but I didn't have a fever or anything like that. Go throughout my day and had an elders meeting that morning.
Monday morning?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
As close as we are here.
You were there?
Mm-hmm.
Were you wearing a mask or no?
No.
Okay. Did they all get it?
No, none of them.
None of them?
Mm-mm.
How many elders?
There were 5 of us, I think, in the room that day.
In a room inside around a table?
No table, just
sitting in chairs like in a circle?
Yeah.
So, like shaking hands or?
Oh, yeah, hugging, yeah.
And they did not, none of them got it?
None of them got it, yeah.
That does not make sense.
Yeah.
That surprises me.
Yeah, so that afternoon I started having a fever and real low grade. We have a 3-story house if you count the basement. And so in the basement, I basically, we've got Netflix down there. So I just told Jill, we've got a fever, keep everybody upstairs. We don't have a return vent down there, so it only blows air. It doesn't recirculate it, which I thought, if it does, if it could spread, it would be less likely to spread that way.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so I just stayed down there for 10 days. I went outside maybe 2 or 3 times when the kids were gone to school and Jill was at work, and walked around for maybe, 4 or 5 minutes and came back in, was chugging Pedialyte, man, like a fish drinks water. I was so much Pedialyte.
What is that?
It's just like electrolyte heavy drink for toddlers, for children. It's when children have like a upset stomach and they get dehydrated. Mm-hmm. It's a electrolyte loaded resource for them to replenish their liquids.
Were you doing that because you were dehydrated, or you were doing that because that would be good for COVID?
I was doing that because I figured it was good to be hydrated.
I see.
When you're sick, increasing your fluids is good. It's one of the first things you do usually when you go to the hospital for something is they get an IV drip going. Yep. And so I just started, drinking a lot of Pedialyte, a lot of water, and never coughed really. Didn't have any stomach problems. I lost 12 pounds in 10 days, which was probably most water, maybe. But it was 101.5 fever for 10 days without a break.
Ooh.
And in the middle of that, like day 4 maybe, and to 6, 2.5 days, it was up to close to 105. And it depends on if my thermometer was right. If my thermometer was right, then it was up to 104 plus. But we take my kids' temps in the morning for them to go to school every morning. And there's constantly, it's 97 point something. So it makes me think it's probably reads lower.
I see.
Maybe, Yep. And so regardless, it was 103 to 105 for 2.5 days without a break. Intense, not necessarily a headache, but intense like ache right around the bridge of the nose into the eyes, as if my eyes were swollen and it hurt to move my eyes left or right. And just tired. I don't remember a lot from that time, but after my fever broke, anytime it towards the end it would kind of go up down, and like the last day, and so anytime it would come down to like less than 101, I would feel amazing, even though it was still a temp.
Sure,
it was just a break because I had it for 10 days. But then day 10 to 16 or 17. My oxygen level was really low, like 93.
How do you know? What were you?
I had one of those I forget what you call
Prick the finger? And
No, it's like they put that little clip on your finger. Yeah. It turns red. It reads your oxygen levels.
Yeah. Okay.
And I believe you're put on a respirator at like 92.
Okay.
But I just remember just like not being able to take a deep breath. We'd walk outside, my wife and I, and because Metro had called me and said, "Hey, you're free to go around. Like you're no longer contagious. You don't have COVID anymore." I was like, "Oh, cool." So I'm going to go for a walk, and got really tired. And my oxygen was really bad for a few days. Couldn't catch my breath. But never did I think that I was in trouble. I just felt like it was like a bad flu, maybe a flu times 2 or 3. But again, no cough, no stomach issues. I did lose my sense of smell.
Okay, I heard that from some friends too.
Yeah, which is no big deal, if you're going to lose a sense, that's probably one of the best sense to lose. But it was neat even getting here. That's why I asked you if there was a brewery, because I could smell the hops, and it's like I'm learning to trust my nose again.
Oh, wow.
That's why I was asking for a clarification on that, because I think, but I
you
can't trust my nose right now.
Absolutely. Yep. What did your oxygen level get down to?
93. Yeah.
Okay. And what's the, is it just 93? Is it 93 out of 100? Like I don't know anything about. It's 93 out of 100.
You want your oxygen level.
Okay. And does that mean you have 100% oxygen or no? Is that just a way to?
I believe it's like the oxygen in the bloodstream
is 100, whatever that is. If it's optimal. So like right now, most likely yours and mine is 100.
Could be, but probably 97, 98.
Okay.
Maybe 99.
Okay. And yours got down to 93. 93. And when do they put you on the ventilator?
I believe it's around 91, 92, something like that.
Ooh, that's pretty early.
Yeah.
Do you think they are still doing that? Because my understanding is they're a lot more hesitant to put people on the ventilator than they were back in March.
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But I was thinking like if your oxygen got to like 60.
That's what I would have thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, like you'd probably be dead at that point.
Wow. Okay.
It's like you wouldn't be able to breathe.
I see.
But it's the amount, I believe it's the amount of oxygen through your breathing that actually gets to your bloodstream.
I see.
Okay.
Yep.
And so it's a upper respiratory virus, COVID is, and it prohibits the lungs from functioning properly. The bronchioli, I think.
Okay.
They get filled with fluid, so they can't disperse the oxygen into the bloodstream as easily. I don't really know what I'm talking about. Just when you're in a basement for 10 days and you have this disease or this virus, you do a lot of Googling. So.
Yeah, I believe that. It doesn't sound fun at all, honestly.
Yeah.
Did you go out and buy the thing that you clip on your finger to check the blood or check the oxygen level in your blood? Or did you have that already?
I had a good friend at our church that brought me a care package of some good baseball DVDs, childhood movies, Angels in the Outfield, Rookie of the Year, Field of Dreams, and some kombucha.
Heck yeah.
Some soup and that device for my finger.
I see.
And some double bubble gum.
Okay. Yeah.
So he said it makes everything feel better. So
what'd you think of the kombucha? Or did you already drink it?
First time I ever had kombucha. And
really?
Yeah. And he said it's supposed to be good for you. And
good for you or good for COVID? Both, maybe.
Maybe both.
Okay.
Yeah. And they also gave me a strange vitamin supplement that's supposed to be good for COVID. I can't remember the name of it. It's a herb of some sort of complex supplement, and it kept me up all night, so I couldn't. It's really expensive though.
Okay.
And I tried it, but it just did not help me sleep at all. But I didn't know if it was that or something else. But,
yeah.
And I take about 25 supplements every day.
Okay.
And through COVID, I just stopped. I couldn't put anything in other than Pedialyte. Because
you had no appetite, or because you would vomit?
I don't know. I just didn't. I just couldn't get myself to. I was just so out of it.
Interesting.
If I could go back, I probably would stay on the supplements.
Sure.
And sip on soup and things like that. And I got to where I could eat, soup and things like that. But it's fascinating how I've been taking vitamins for years. And then I get this virus and I stop.
Right.
And some of the vitamins are the very vitamins they say helps COVID.
Right.
Zinc, vitamin C,
exactly.
D.
Yep.
Yep. And I just,
But you were already taking that,
you
huh?
know, I was, but I just stopped all that when
Yeah.
I needed it most.
Right.
You know, I don't know. I just wasn't thinking, you know, it's really strange. But yeah, they just brought me that care package and it had that in there.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife's she makes all the kombucha. I have 2 glasses a day.
Wow.
I don't eat until dinner time. So I have a protein shake after workout 11:30. So in the morning, it's a glass of kombucha and a coffee. And then usually I have a glass of kombucha in the evening too. But it took me, she'd been making it for probably 3 or 4 years, honestly, before I started drinking it. I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
Just could not stand it. And then I acquired a taste and now I'm kind of hooked on it.
You do have to acquire a taste, I think.
It is. Yeah.
It's, because I grew up tasting things like that in our refrigerator. And when you did, you had to throw it out. It's like, this is turned. This is no longer good.
But what's the deal with potatoes? Do you just happen to like potatoes? Is it one of the only foods you can eat, or is it good for COVID? Because you
so when I started, when I was getting off of COVID and getting an appetite back, I put whatever my body wanted into my body, like anything I craved.
Okay,
I took in because 1, I was thankful to actually have an appetite. 2. I knew I needed the nutrients, and there was something in the foods I craved that I needed. So there was something about the foods that I wanted. One of my friends and I've been watching Netflix down the basement, been watching TV. My neighbor was like, "What can I get you?" And I'm like, "Man, I've been watching this Burger King Whopper like commercial like so many times every day. I kind of want a Whopper. And by the way, they're 2 for $5 right now." And so he brought me a Whopper, and it's like I can't tell you the last time because I overthink really everything that I eat. Everything that goes in me, I really overthink.
Yeah.
Or I try to think through really a lot. And but this, I was just like, man, I just want a Whopper.
Yep.
And hadn't had a Whopper in maybe 10 years or so. Took it in, ate it. It was delicious. No regrets. And then the next day, I was having to go take my daughter to her cross-country meet. And it was like my first day out. I was kind of tired. I was meeting her there. She rode there with the team. And I passed a Burger King. And I'm like, man, I'm going to get me a Whopper. And so I got in the drive-thru 2 Whoppers, 1 Big Fish, and 1 fry, and a Diet Coke. And I'm eating this stuff in less than 4 minutes on my way to our cross-country meet. And I'm just thinking, Jeremy, what are you doing? You know, but I was just, again, so glad to eat. And then I started this potato, man, like potatoes, everything. Maybe 7, 8 a day for 5 days, 6 days it lasted. Tater tots, fries, just no sweet potatoes, just potatoes. But I did go like red potato, gold potato.
Okay, you mix it up a little bit.
Yeah. Sometimes butter, sometimes hot sauce, sometimes ranch with a ketchup and a mustard blend.
Oh, dang, that sounds so good.
It's like a
my
Zaxby
goodness.
sauce.
Oh,
Zax sauce. Yeah.
You do like. You said ranch with some,
and then a little bit less ranch, a little bit less ketchup than the ranch.
Yep.
And then a little bit less mustard than the ketchup. And you do salt and then heavy pepper.
Oh my goodness, that sounds delicious.
Just like Zax sauce without the anchovies, because there's anchovies in Zaxby sauce.
Okay.
So you don't get that little strange taste in there. But not that it's bad. It's just you can tell it's not exactly that sauce.
Yep.
And so I don't normally eat potatoes. If I eat potatoes, it's sweet potatoes. Just as is, or some Tony Cajun seasoning on it. Other than that, I'll just eat a sweet potato out. I'll just unfoil it, and just eat it cold. It doesn't matter. It's all about the nutrition for me. Yeah. And here I am eating these white potatoes and stuff, and it's like, what is happening? But I was just thrilled to be able to have an appetite.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's probably good to get nutrients back in your body too. Yeah. I mean, there's something to listening to your body. Mm-hmm. I mean, I understand you can't just eat whatever you want all the time, but I feel like sometimes your body just feels like it needs a certain thing.
Yeah. So my friend was like, "So was your body needing ranch?" Like, maybe because it knew a potato was the vehicle for the ranch.
Yeah, exactly.
But there is some wisdom, I think, to listen to your body, particularly when you're coming out of illness like that.
Yeah.
But it's not anything that I do anymore. But man, you look up the nutritional facts on a potato. Those jokers, they're loaded with some stuff.
Good stuff or bad stuff?
I mean, you've got your starches, of course, that's associated with it.
Yep.
But several good vitamins that are in there.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised.
Yeah. Your wife did not get it. None of the kids got it.
Nope.
That still surprises me that you would have been highly contagious to that elders meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and none of them got it. I mean, if half of them got it, or that would sound about right, but
Mm-hmm.
none of them getting it. Any theories on that?
Man, I don't really know what to think. And people ask, like, where did you get it? And contact tracing and things like that. I'm like, well, again, this is just Jeremy. I don't know that anybody can say for a fact where they got it from, unless you never go out anywhere and the only person you see is your mailman. Then you probably got it from your mailman,
Right?
But if you're out at all in any way, just because I'm here and I would get it doesn't mean I got it here. It could have been somebody in the other room that happened to just walk past. I mean,
right?
How do you know?
It's true.
And so, having gone through all that, and I would say I don't know of anyone personally that has had a worse experience under 50, let alone anybody that is focused on fitness like I am. I don't know of anybody that has had it as bad as I had it personally.
Mm-hmm.
Like my dad had some intense heart problems earlier this year on Father's Day. Had to go to the hospital. Thought it was a heart attack, and he doesn't have the greatest blood pressure, cholesterol numbers. He had COVID 3 weeks ago in Virginia, and felt bad for 2 or 3 days, and that was it.
Wow.
And my mom, his wife, didn't get it. My brother got it, and he lives there near them. They go to the same church, and my brother, fit guy, 39 years old. Didn't feel good for maybe 4 days, had a fever for a day, and that was it. And then here I am.
It is
I'm
so
by
strange.
far the most, my brother's going to hate this, but I'm by far the most fit
Okay.
out of us three Rose boys. And, my dad being one of the Rose boys. But, but I had the definite worst case.
That
and nobody
is-
else, my brother's wife didn't get it. My nieces didn't get it. So it's really, it's odd.
so strange.
It's odd.
It is odd how it does affect different people that way. I mean, Trump was 74 years old. He's He's a little overweight. I think technically, like by definition, obese. In a couple of days,
I
in
know.
and out,
It's like,
you know what I mean?
That would have been awesome for me.
Exactly. And people are like, well, but he's the president. But keep in mind, my understanding is that he didn't take anything that's not available to the general public.
Yeah.
And yet people do die. People are dying from it. A lot of people have. 200,000 plus people have died from it. The thing that
Or died
concerns...
with it.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is a key. Yeah, that's a key point.
Yeah, and I was taking Tylenol, because that's basically, Tylenol or Advil or something, and I felt like there was nothing. It was like hand throwing BBs at an armored tank coming at you.
Okay.
I just
It didn't help with the pain?
Nothing.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think my experience is you just have to endure it. There's really little to nothing.
Okay.
that
Did you
can do.
ever consider going to the hospital?
No.
Okay.
I mean,
Well,
but because I think from my understanding, if you go to the hospital, they're basically just going to say, go home, quarantine, here's some Tylenol.
really?
Unless you're like needing to be on a ventilator,
Okay.
why are they going to?
Well, my fear with going to the hospital would be that they would put me on the ventilator too soon because that was doing all kinds of damage back in the spring. Lung infections and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Apparently, you don't want to go on the ventilator unless you. I mean, there was people that died because they went on the ventilator.
Right.
So, but I think they changed that now. They're not so quick to put people on the ventilator. So that was sort of my fear if I got it. Was you go into the hospital, next thing you know, I'm on the ventilator. And now I have long-term health damage because of the ventilator. But it doesn't sound like they're doing that for people quite as readily anymore.
Right. They're probably putting you on like an oxygen feed, through the nostrils.
Right.
Making sure you get oxygen-rich air.
Right. Which I think I'm not aware of adverse effects to that. So I mean,
Right.
that seems decent.
I would have loved that.
Because don't football players even do that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So basically, for you, it would have had to get worse in some way, and then you just have like at some point you would have went to the hospital. You just didn't feel like you were there.
Right. Yeah, I did.
see.
And but even still, going back, again, this is my opinion here, but having a real tough go at it. This might be a little controversial or a lot, but having gone through a really tough bout with this virus compared to others my age, I still think it's a little over the top to be so afraid of it.
Yeah.
Because it was unfortunate. It was difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a rough go, but I still was not like, I'm going to die.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been times in our home throughout all of 2020, since February, that anxiety has been debilitating
Mm-hmm.
and much worse than anything I experienced with actual COVID.
Yes. That's a
And
big point.
yeah, and so I had it, I endured it, and when I look at the effects of fearing it,
Mm-hmm.
I would much rather have COVID than fear COVID.
Yeah. The thing that I was concerned about the most was apparently sometimes people that got it, and I don't know how many or whatever, but I have read this a couple of times in the newspaper, that sometimes it can take your muscles of your heart, which are long, and sort of dice them up. And now you have a long-term, basically, damage to your heart because now it's working with dice muscles instead of full muscles. That sounds terrible. That's not something that I wanted to have happen.
Yeah.
I don't know how common that is.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's one of those things where, I read it. I know it can happen. I don't know how often it happens. I don't know if you already have a pre-existing heart condition for that to happen. I don't know. I just know that it has happened, and now I'm walking around with that sort of fear in my mind.
Yeah.
And then so you take that and some of the misinformation that went out there, then what the news, kind of pumping it up, and everywhere you look, someone's talking about COVID, and someone made an interesting point a couple of weeks ago that I heard, that the death ticker, basically, where you're like, we're all so focused on how many cases and how many deaths, like so focused. That's not really doing anyone any good, because we don't have a death ticker for tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of tobacco, everyone picks your battles, which I know, Andrew, we're not going to be able to see this, unfortunately, for the people watching on YouTube, but right there is two lungs, one from a smoker and one from a non-smoker, and look at that, it's awful.
Wow.
So for people that are picture like what looks like two kind of water balloon shaped type things, that's a set of lungs, and the non-smoker, is basically pink, and the smoker literally looks like it's black. It looks like it's charred. It looks like it's charcoal. It looks like it was a smoked lung. Like,
it looks like the difference between, like, those red hot dogs, the old-fashioned hot dogs.
Yeah.
Like, it looks like the color of that.
Yes.
And then the other one looks like one that you would burn to a hard crisp.
It does. It's exactly what it looks like. And that's the difference between a cigarette smoker and a non-smoker. And, the average deaths in America running for the last couple of years with tobacco, it's about 480. I think last year was 480,000. So this year it might be even a little bit more than that. I mean, that's so many people that die from tobacco smoke. So many. The average death age for a tobacco smoker is 10 years less than a non-smoker. I'm actually surprised it's not more than that. But when you look at the news, you don't see a death ticker for tobacco.
Right.
You don't see a death ticker for people that died from alcohol, overdoses, or car wrecks, those types of things. And so it's more back in mind. Like, I think of one of our mutual friends, Andrew and I's, is a guy named Mac, who's a cop, and he was just mentioning a while ago that people would be surprised how much crime goes on around them. And I'm not surprised to hear that. Like, I haven't dealt with crime, but I'm not. But then I see on, like, the Nextdoor app, like, it happens in our neighborhood, but I haven't seen it personally and I haven't witnessed it. And so I kind of go about my life, and I'm not shocked to hear there's a lot of violent crime that goes on, but I don't see it, I don't hear it, and I don't hear it talked about. And so it's sort of in the back of my mind. I'm just going to go about my life.
What you don't know to be afraid of.
What you don't know, you don't know. Well, but then you have with COVID, it's like the opposite extreme. It's always being talked about. It's always front and center. I mean, the media is pushing it, and I guess it gets viewers, and this fear kind of society generates viewers, clicks, which generates revenue.
Oh, big time.
So yeah, that is a little unfortunate.
I think the ticker, if I could explain this to my kids, if I were a news source, if I wanted to handle the news and distribute the news like a parent would a child, I think I would focus on the recoveries, right? Mm-hmm. And so instead of we've reached 5 or 10 million total cases, however many the cases are, instead I would say, well, there's this many active right now cases, because the big number doesn't matter.
Yeah,
the big number of cases is irrelevant.
Right.
right?
Yes.
And so the relevant number to me is what do we have right now?
Mm-hmm.
And let's look at how many have recovered. Like this
Yes.
is loaded with hope.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
Like it is radically more hopeful than what they make it out to believe.
Yes.
Something interesting. One of the gentlemen that goes to our church is on the Chamber of Commerce with Nashville, and they like to at times pull out minutes from years past. So they took the minutes out from 1917, 1918, 1919. The Spanish flu was 1918. They took out the minutes. This was probably 2 months ago. And they were going to see how they handled or addressed or talked about the Spanish flu. So they put out the minutes, looking through it. Nothing was mentioned. Nothing.
Wow.
Not even on the city's radar. Not minute-worthy anyway. Nobody brought it up.
That is
the main
surprising.
concern was the illnesses and the condition of the men coming back from war. And I can't remember what it was. Maybe I don't know. I don't think it was polio, but they were coming back with a particular illness, or maybe it was a mental side effect of war or something. I can't remember. That was in the minutes, but nothing was mentioned of the Spanish flu. You know?
So why? Like back then, they just assumed that was sort of up to the people, and they're going to be smart and wise enough. It's kind of between them and their doctors, and they'll figure it out. And that's not the role of government to involve themselves, or the chamber to involve themselves in that. Is that why?
Well, I think news spread a lot slower back then.
Yeah, that's
compared
true.
to Twitter today, right?
Yep.
I'm not beating us up as a culture, but I do think that we're very sensitive, and I just think that they were mentally more stable. Like they expected things to be hard.
That's
they
a key point.
expected things
Yeah.
to be difficult.
Yeah.
And we expect things to be easy. And if
We do.
something's broken, we just have to get something new. We don't know how to fix or repair.
Yes.
If something's difficult, get it out of my life. If someone's negative to me, I'm unfriending them. I'm not going home for family vacation today because my parents said something that hurt my feelings. And, we're just so sensitive.
Yes.
But we're not sensitive. We don't have to be this sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
We're a lot stronger than what we think we are.
Yes.
And so I think that, and the difference in handling the Spanish flu back then and how we're handling this today, I think they were tougher in some ways, and news spread slower. And I would like to think not that all news was full of integrity back then, but I would like to think that there's a lot more fake news today.
Oh, there 100% is. I mean,
and people taking slants.
And I mean, it's irrefutable that there's other countries involved now in the whole fake news thing as well. Now, you touched on it, and I think an interesting and important point that we haven't really talked about much on the podcast yet, Andrew, which is the other very bad societal effects that have come along with shutting down the country and all of. Andrew, you had an article on the World Health Organization, I believe, that talked about, did they reverse course and basically they came out and said that if something like this were to happen again, we don't recommend we shut everything down, because now we're seeing the poverty, the anxiety, the depression, the isolation, all of these things that came out.
Yep.
Yeah. Who abandons past support for lockdowns now says stay-at-home orders double world poverty.
Wow.
Yeah. What was the key takeaway there, Andrew?
Their key takeaway was that the lockdowns, when it came to the spread of the virus, did not have the positive effect like they initially thought that it did. And the only real noticeable change was the negative change on the world poverty rate, because people were losing jobs because of the lockdowns.
Yes.
And they said right here, I mean, according to WHO envoy Dr. David Nabarro, lockdowns are doubling poverty rates and should not be used as a primary means of controlling the virus.
Yeah, and down the paragraph below it says, we in the WHO do not advocate lockdowns as the primary means of control of the virus, and adding that lockdowns are essentially stopgap maneuvers So the only time that a lockdown is justified is to buy you time to reorganize, regroup, rebalance your resources, protect your health workers who are exhausted, but by and large, we'd rather not do it. So when you look at that, and then you look at what certainly parts of the country, like particularly California and New York, I mean, they went, and other states too, I mean, they went pretty hard lockdowns.
Washington State too, I believe.
Oh, yeah. So you're a pastor, and what do you see have you seen or do you see as some of the negative effects of doing what we have done, and how quick are we going to be able to kind of recoup from that?
Yeah. First thought, when I see that about, lockdowns harming jobs and increasing poverty, is I also think of just pornography. Like I know at Nashville Metro, this isn't probably true for all your viewers and listeners, but for Nashville Metro schools, they dispersed laptops to every kid, right? And there's a beautiful side of that. Be able to stay connected, continue learning. I love that. But, man, that's a lot of opportunity at home during the day with little to no oversight for porn to just become infiltrated into that home, which makes money, unfortunately. But it costs, I don't know if we'll ever know the damage of the lockdown in regards to what it's going to do to future marriages and relationships, and to be able to, in a healthy way, be social and have friendships.
Yeah.
But as a pastor, this past Sunday, at the beginning of our first service, I couldn't get composure. I was just looking. I felt like I could feel and sense the burden, the emotional burden, not necessarily spiritual, that our people were carrying, and I just hated that I couldn't take it away. I hated that I couldn't fix it. I hated that they are having to walk through 2020 like this. It really just broke my heart, and it took me several minutes to get those words out. It was really hard, and so I know that our people are afraid. Some are just not leaving their homes at all until the vaccine. Others think this is all ridiculous. We're very diverse. That's something that 2020 has taught us as a church, is we are very, very diverse. We think very differently. Many different ways of thinking in our church family. And so trying to balance, like, how do you lead a people that are polarized, and that not only do they think they're doing it the right way, they judge others for not doing it that way because of the media that they're absorbing, and that through analytics and algorithms, they're being fed certain ideologies that they agree with, and so it just kind of creates. You watch Social Dilemma. So and I was aware of a lot of that just from personal experience, and it just makes sense. It's why we're so polarized.
Yep.
A lot of that is coming from our phone usage and social media usage, and so trying to keep people focused on Jesus and the gospel and hope through this is, and it's hard. But trying to have a very soft, empathetic, and patient, gracious heart to, however, the way I've said this so many times this year, is we're all doing our best. If your best is staying home and waiting for a vaccine, man, crush it. Do a good job. There's no guilt, no shame right here. If your best is getting out and for the sake of your mental health, you've got to go about your life as normal, man, you do you. I think all of us should be careful and cautious. But again, that's so relative, right?
Right.
Subjective. But we have to get through this, and we're all going to handle it in different ways. What people don't need is they don't need to feel judged for handling it a certain way.
Yeah.
That I don't know that helps anything, particularly when you're going through a pandemic.
Right.
You know.
Yes. Yeah. The social dilemma. Did you see that we just talked about this yesterday, but 64% of people that are in extremist groups on Facebook were directed there from algorithms.
Wow. I did not know that.
64%.
I watched that
so
when
crazy.
I was in isolation.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
In the basement.
Yeah.
So I remember some of it. I don't remember all of it.
Yeah. But it does have a real impact. And, you know, what I'm kind of curious about, and by the way, there was another study in June. This was on the Intercept's website. There was a study in June. Over the last 30 days, there was, I want to say 2,000. I might have that number wrong, but there was a significant amount of people that were surveyed. The respondents were 18 to 24 years old, and 25.5% of them, of the survey respondents, again, 18 to 24 years old, prime of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was in June. Over the last 30 days, had seriously considered, 25.5% of the respondents had seriously considered suicide as a viable option in the past 30 days. That is so high.
Mm-hmm.
That is so high. Like for that age group, quarter of the people seriously considering, not like, oh, at one point I thought about it, like seriously considered suicide. I mean, that's pretty bad. And I think part of it is COVID has revealed that our social fabric is maybe not as strong as we thought it was to begin with.
Yeah.
But then it's also, it's hard to make the case that it hasn't continued to tear it apart.
Absolutely.
It just has, you know? And I think of the effects of this that are going to play out for years to come. And one of those effects, I think, is when a 3-year-old kid is at the playground because they're finally let to come out of the house, and the grandma comes over to see the grandkids, and she hasn't seen them in months, and the 3-year-old runs up to the grandma to give her a hug, and the grandma runs away from the 3-year-old.
Mm.
I mean, that happens.
Mm.
And if you're a 3-year-old kid, how do you understand that how do you understand COVID-19?
Yeah.
And I'm with you on the not judge part, but there's some effects here for
Absolutely.
our kids that maybe it's better not to see them if that's how we're going to treat them. Absolutely. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure that running away from a 3-year-old kid is the right thing to do to begin with. But,
yeah, well, the anxiety, the panic, and everything that my house endured this year, in April and May, that's kind of early on compared to where we are now with COVID. Once that began to affect our home, that's when I was like, okay, we've got to get out. We're done with this.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We were hard locked down for like 7.5 weeks.
Okay.
We went out twice.
Oh, wow.
I went to the grocery store a couple times. My wife went to Chick-fil-A twice, the drive-through. And I refused to eat anything from any restaurant like that because there was so little that we knew. We didn't know if you could get it from surface. We didn't know if you could get it from food.
Yes.
It was so new.
Yep.
So I don't mind the lockdowns and the extreme caution, particularly early 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Man, we know a lot more now.
I agree 100%. Yep.
But when that changed for us, when there were some events that took place, and it's like, okay, we're done with COVID.
Yeah.
We're finished.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up getting it, right?
Yeah.
And then even in getting it, it's like, that was, rough, but it's not worth isolating. I mean, our neighbors would come over and play Xbox through our glass back door with my kids. They wouldn't even come inside. We were hardcore locked down, and it took a toll, and, on the suicide thing, that is, again, why I would point out the ticker. I would point out the recovered.
Yes.
And the total cases recovered and active cases today.
Yes.
Right. And then sure, a death ticker is not a bad idea either.
Yep.
But the whole huge, massive number of total cases.
Yes.
And I think even our mayor puts out every day, I don't know, however many thousands of total cases. I think today we had 25. There's 2,500 active cases in Davidson County today.
Mm-hmm.
But he always lists the huge number of total cases. That's irrelevant.
Exactly.
It's irrelevant.
I totally agree with that point.
Ticker.
It is. I totally agree with that point because what's so weird about this, man, and this is where it's like whatever messaging they're trying to convey is working because, I mean, you're starting to understand how I'm thinking about COVID and those and I'm not that scared of it. I don't want to get it. I am taking precautions. I'm not going to let it shut me down. I think it's crazy to run away from your 3-year-old granddaughter. I think you should either not see her or give her a hug when you do see her. Again, take precautions. I don't care. That's all good and dandy. But so, and I'm with you on the 217,000 plus deaths or whatever that we've had. Those are people that have died with COVID. Now, I would seem like plenty of them have died from COVID. Okay, and so any death's bad, right? But again, we just established 500,000 people die from tobacco this year. No one's talking about that.
Heart disease is much more. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that would be an interesting stat to look at. So you understand how I'm thinking about this and kind of how I'm looking at it. And still, when I hear numbers about total cases in America, there's part of me that's like, well, dang, we're all going to die. You know what I mean? Like, well, this thing's really getting bad. This thing's taking over because you're talking about total cases. We have another 60,000 cases in America, and that adds to the total. And here we are, this is the total in the country, and there's so much emphasis put on that. It's like a subconscious thing that it's like it does work. Whatever messaging they're trying to convey is working because even in my mind, I'm thinking, crap, this is just getting worse. Yeah. It's snowballing. It's not getting better. I mean, but then there's the stat on how many people have recovered, and we're not paying enough attention to that.
Yeah, but if you have a doomsday, ticker, and it does bring about a certain amount of fear. When people are afraid, a significant portion of them can be better controlled. Right?
Yes.
And so, when you are afraid, there's a sense of hopelessness that sets in, and you'll do whatever you're told to survive.
Yes.
Others will revolt to that, right? Now, a way to think about suicide is, you remember 9/11, right?
Mm-hmm.
There were the jumpers. They didn't classify the jumpers as suicide deaths, right? But a death by terrorism. But they took their own life, right? Their act, but they didn't classify it as suicide. And I think it's important because they didn't show up to work wanting to take their life. They had no other way out. And so when people are caught up in such a fear narrative, and they see these numbers, and it leads them to such fear, and it's just inevitable. Everybody is going to die of this thing, is what they're thought. Like,
oh man, I hadn't thought of it like that.
And so it creates this hopelessness.
Yeah.
And so suicide rates go up because much like the people in the buildings that jumped, they didn't want to die. They just didn't see another way out.
Yes.
And so they jump. And so here we are with this culture, and there's so much fear. That's why I think, man, for the sake of the people who don't have the emotional capacity to process 2020, let's talk about the recovered number. Let's share stories instead of the stories every night with Lester Holt about a victim that's young and healthy that's died. Let's talk about so many old people with pre-existing conditions. Let's talk about their stories of survival.
Yes.
Let's celebrate that. Let's not just focus on young, healthy dying, because all that is doing is creating fear for the young, healthy guy.
Yes.
That is hunkered down in his bunker, living off a generator, afraid to breathe, and hasn't been outside in 7 months, and he's going to kill himself, right? Yep. It's like, let's offer this guy hope.
Yes.
But if you don't have hope, if it's only a matter of time, and that's the narrative you're being fed, I can see why you could get to such a despairing place.
Yeah.
It's not that you want to die. You just don't see another way out.
That's an interesting thought I hadn't thought of when you compare that to the jumpers at 9/11. I think that's a key point. And also, the government just tripped over themselves at places too. When you look at what happened in New York City, they thought they needed to be the man and shut everything down, which again, I don't really fault them for that. In mid-February, no one knew what this was. I mean, we thought this who knows what this is? So you're just doing what you can. But what got weird was then end of March into April when we started to actually know some things about it. And then you started to see the different mayors in different cities and the different governors kind of power tripping. And a good example of the government tripping over themselves is New York City. Who's the mayor? Oh, okay, Andrew
de Blasio
Cuomo
is the mayor.
Blasio is the mayor. Cuomo is the governor. And Cuomo, this is so hard to believe. And my family gets a little bit into the conspiracy sometimes. So when this was hitting the family group thread in like spring, summer, I honestly didn't pay any attention to it. So this is bad on me because I thought it was maybe a conspiracy. But the thought or the fact was that Kumo was forcing nursing homes to take back in COVID patients. And I was like, there's no way. So I never paid any attention to it. Well, as it turns out, no, that's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And like 11,000 older folks died because of this. So here we are shutting down the city, mandating lockdowns, shutdowns, everything like that. We're tripping over ourselves because we're also doing ridiculous things like saying nursing homes have to take back in these elderly patients that had COVID. Well, guess what? It spread like wildfire.
Mm-hmm.
And so many thousands die. I mean, the number that sticks in my mind was like 33,000 died in New York in a relatively short amount of time, but like a third of them were because of the nursing home debacle. It's so crazy, man.
Yeah, I think it's closer to 40,000.
Now I'm sure it is. Yeah,
it's wild, man. And so it doesn't take much creativity to create a growing narrative of fear.
Yeah.
To control, but that comes at and to leverage politically,
right?
And that just gets really scary.
Yeah, it sure
scary.
does. Hey, back to your COVID being worse. Do you smoke cigars or cigarettes? Or are you a smoker of any kind?
Rarely.
Okay,
rarely,
so that's not a thing, huh?
Yeah. And I run. I ran 3.6 miles this morning, and then lifted weights for 40 minutes. Burned 1,200 calories in an hour and 15 minutes this morning.
Nice.
And so that's normal.
Okay. Yeah.
On Sundays before I preach a couple times, which my watch, by the way, counts as cardio. Sometimes
right.
my preaching.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
Your watch will tick up.
Yeah, it'll
because
it'll
you pace the stage, or because your heart rate goes up.
Heart rate and hand movement.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's like, it looks like you're working out. Record his workout.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
But usually, even before I preach, I run 3 miles on a Sunday morning before I do
really?
my prep and stuff. Yeah.
How many services?
2 services, 9 and 11.
9 and 11. Have you ever done 3 services?
No, I don't think so. Maybe at a church I preached at before as just a guest.
Okay.
Preacher.
Would you say 2 services is manageable and 3 services to kind of preach 3? Like, do you really want to keep the 2 services if at all possible?
Yeah, I think 2 services best. My opinion. You know, I've seen many guys do it differently. And we've thought about going to 3 services at different times in our church. And I get to a point where I'm like, well, that 3rd service is going to essentially end up being why not do it at a different time? Like, why feel like you need to do 3 back to back to back? If you keep your 2 and then move that to a Tuesday, move it to a Sunday night, move it to a Saturday, a Thursday, or a church plant.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like,
preferably a church plant.
Yeah, man. It's like,
but wouldn't a Sunday night, because I kind of feel like, I have no idea, but to preach back to back and then you go home and eat lunch and you're
watch
around
football,
the house and
have to up.
But then you have to come back for a Sunday night service and preach again. That seems taxing. In some ways, it just seems like it'd be better to go back to back and get it done.
Well, my whole life, I'm a pastor's kid, 4th generation pastor myself. And so my dad grew up, I grew up watching my dad preach once on Sunday morning, a different sermon Sunday night, a different sermon Wednesday night.
Wow.
And so for us to talk about taxing to preach the same sermon 3 times instead of a different sermon 3 times in a week.
Yeah.
2 in one day.
Yep.
Different sermons. He would probably laugh at that being taxing,
Right. Exactly. Well, wasn't it back in the no, is this Calvin's day or more recent? No, it was more like in the Great Awakening times, like Whitfield and Edwards, I guess. Some of those guys are preaching 12, 13 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
They were just going for it.
Martin Lloyd-Jones would preach Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and Friday night. And it would all be different. And it would all be different sorts of sermons.
Okay.
Different types of sermons.
Yeah.
Different audiences, different goals.
Yes. So he's clearly not putting in 40 hours per sermon at that point.
Right.
At that point, do you think you were just saturating yourself in the Word, picking a subject matter, and just having some thoughts in that direction, but it's really just born out of an overall saturation in the Word? Right?
Yeah, there's a cumulative effect, I think, of being a 70-year-old pastor who has preached, 20,000 times.
Yep.
And, you've been in this text and a student, Lord willing, you've read through the Bible, 40, 50 times.
Mm-hmm.
You get the big idea. You understand themes. You have a significant active working of theology on a number of different topics. And so then you just kind of hold up a newspaper and you just begin to read the paper rather than try to research the Bible to start out with. And you just think in the newspaper, meaning like, what are our people going through?
Yes.
And then it's like, well, Friday nights, I want to address this issue in our people. And then you think, okay, well, how has Jesus thought on this? Paul, how has Isaiah, what did Moses say about this? What, how does this fit in God's big picture? And then you just begin to weave some different passages together.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you know the word, you understand what your people are going through, and you know your people.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like the work of a shepherd, understands the pasture, understands the enemy, understands the sheep, understands the trajectory, the goal, and the food that they need. And you just, from your heart, it's a teacher's giving information, but a pastor is like nurturing as a daddy to a son.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't have to go study a book on how to hug my son, how to encourage him after a game. I'm not Googling like what to say to a kid after a bad performance on the football field.
Yes.
I'm just like, buddy, I'm proud of you no matter what, man. Like, there's always next game. Let's put in some work together. But I guarantee you that no matter what you did, I wouldn't be more proud or less proud of you. It is awesome to see you wear this uniform and sweat and work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to Google that information. And so I think, your years that are involved in pastoring and in the Word, at that point, now where a guy 25 years old, 30 years old sits, and he thinks about doing that every week and all the hours it takes. I mean, man, it's the feedback I get from certain sermons, it's the sermons that I don't use any commentary, where I just take the text and basically just write my thoughts out in the form of a manuscript, and I preach those thoughts in regards to that text for our people on a Sunday. That always seems to get the most encouraging replies. But it makes me the scariest because I feel like I'm out on a limb by myself.
Yes.
It's just me and the Word,
Okay.
Because I'm still like young enough to feel like, well, I could be, really wrong, and I want to make sure.
Sure.
But then you consult the commentaries. My story is this: I consult the commentaries to see if I'm right, and then they say some awesome stuff, and it's like, I've got to include this. Well, then I'm borrowing it. It's not my passion.
Yes.
And so then it's like, well, man, I want to be able to share my passion, but this is a really cool story that he used. And so just selecting, you don't want to get up there and just feel like you're reading a commentary or borrowing information, citing it or not. I'm not talking about plagiarism, but just it's just, there's something about knowing your people, knowing the Word, and just encouraging them in the gospel. That's it.
What is it about a content or idea that comes from you directly, which, of course, we would have hoped it would come from the Holy Spirit, through the Word, through you, through your thoughts. But what is it about the difference between an original thought and something that comes from a commentary? Why can that be picked up on? Because it can be. And it's not, obviously, there's lots of times, right, where it makes total sense to pull from commentaries. But what you're saying doesn't surprise me. Like, that seems about right, If someone is kind of, they feel like they're coming up with some original content, or they feel like the Holy Spirit is guiding them in a certain way from the text, and they're going to kind of trust in that, and they're excited about that. And there's a certain level of, what is it? Originality, authenticity, passion that comes from that, where if you start to borrow, that can be picked up on. It feels different. How do people, what is that? How do people pick up on that?
Man, I don't think there's any substitute for personal experience of, when you witnessed an incredible ball game, right? An event, you can describe it in many different ways with a lot of passion. But if you watched it or heard from someone else of their story, there's a lot less detail, and there's not the same passion because you didn't experience it. Like, it's effortless for them to share it because it's so real. I can talk to you about the Clemson catch and my boy jumping in my arms, and we both started crying. We had no idea why we were crying. It's a football game. It's like, I don't get a ring, I don't get money, but we were in tears.
That's so great.
I never would have thought, as a big of a fan as I am, that I would have wept in that moment. But even just talking right now, right?
Yeah.
I'm letting you in on, like, I experienced this. Well, if you just read the newspaper of a sports report of that catch, you can tell a difference in someone, even if they're trying to manufacture passion. All they're giving you is the facts. They're not letting you know how it feels. But I'm going more of how I felt. And, oh, yeah, by the way, we won. Then there was 1 second left, and it was, Deshaun Watson, number 4, to Hunter Renfrow, number 13. I can give you the facts. But I go into more of the feeling. And I think when you read a commentary or use a commentary in a sermon, rather than it being something that is originated through your study and it's original to you, you run the risk of reading the paper rather than just telling the feeling, like explaining, like with passion, something that you discovered or learned and how it impacted you, right? And so, like, I train 12 of our men at our church, a different 12 every year, in how to preach. We're finishing up. We're limping across the finish line because of COVID. It's been the longest year of our pastoral leadership collective, but we call it our PLC. But it's wrapping up now. We've got one more session in November. And I can tell when these young guys are reading a commentary from their manuscript. Because it's really good. And
that's funny.
Man, it's good. And I mean, nothing against their brilliance, right? But it's amazing. And it flows so cleanly. It's not choppy. But there's little to no emotion behind it. And then you get a guy up there who, through tears and a lot of clumsy words, a lot of he explains something that he learned through that text and how it's encouraged him and his family and his wife, how it's convicted him. The theological depth isn't like the guy who read the commentary, but that you get pulled in, and you get to look at that text in a beautiful way when someone is sharing firsthand experience of how this has affected them. There's a greater sensitivity in that moment that he's in, and vulnerability. It's like if you, I've heard that preaching is like holding a sword, holding a knife, and often we like to think that we hold the handle, right, and we rightly divide the word of truth, right, to the marrow. It's the power of the word. But you sling that blade a lot more carefully when it's turned the other way. And the point of that blade is in your palm, and you're gripping it by the edge. And preaching is preaching with that sensitivity, and you're speaking from the wound, the conviction, the change that you've experienced, from the blood that has flown from it cutting you, instead of you just trying to use it to impress or cut other people. Yeah. There's a big difference.
Whoa, I never heard it put like that. That's something that'll stick. That's a very good mental picture of how to handle the word.
Different meekness and humility.
Yeah.
And trying to be impressive,
Yes. And man, yeah. It's funny because why is it that when we hear like the word is like the sword of truth, we always picture we're the ones that's holding that sword by the handle.
Yeah.
As if like,
as if God's not.
As if God's not, and as if like as if we don't need to be kind of cut clean with that sword, just along with everybody else.
Yeah, and I would say don't preach the text. Until it's wounded you, until it's convicted you, until it's humbled you in some way. Even one of our guys this morning was texting me about the text that he has to preach in November, and he's just like, man, this chapter, because he's doing a 23rd Psalm, and he's like, I can't preach this text until it's wounded me greatly first. And I'm like, man, that's it. Like, that's because it's easy. That's a coffee cup, coffee mug verse,
right.
The chapter 23rd Psalm. And so it's got to inform you and shape you in some way. And then it takes a lot of discernment and wisdom, which comes through experience and failure, of how to preach that text without embellishing like a confessional booth, group therapy of how it's affected you.
Yep.
It takes a lot of wisdom. But there's a huge movement to kind of go into that more felt need kind of the pastor is a horrible sinner just like everybody else. It's like he has to always say that he's, a failure too. He can't just call people to repentance as pastors have throughout history. He has to preface it that he's a clumsy fool too. That's unfortunate. And I don't think it should be that way. And it also can become this confessional booth group therapy moment where the pastor just woos people emotionally through their story, through this text. And it's like, well, yeah, that's cool. Like, I'm really glad that impacted you like that. But let's get people to see Jesus through this text.
Yes, exactly. It's almost like having experienced the Scripture work on you in a certain way, or having God pull you through a certain thing. You experience a certain thing, come through a hardship or a suffering or whatever that experience is that helps you, where you actually experience the Word, experience the text, experience the power of God in suffering, or whatever that is. It's almost like experiencing it is that's the difference maker when you're preaching it or communicating it later. It's not like you have to later then communicate all of the details of what you went through. Like, just going through it and then preaching on it is really, that's the difference maker.
Right. So,
it's less about going back and telling everything that ever happened.
Yeah,
just going through it is the thing.
Yeah, think of it this way. Letting it impact you and affect you personally is what qualifies you to preach it, in a sense. I'm not talking about the qualifications, Paul, Timothy, right? I'm talking about just in regards to this. Letting the text impact you qualifies you to preach it and teach it. It doesn't provide the content of the sermon. It's just the qualifier for you to preach that sermon. Does that make sense? Don't let your experience be what qualifies you. Don't let your experience be the content that you share.
Exactly. And just as people can pick up on the difference between I am preaching or teaching or talking from original content versus commentaries, don't you think they can also pick up on it whether you're talking about something or preaching or teaching from something that you have experienced or not experienced? You don't have to say that you experienced it. It's just having experienced it changes your tone. It changes your
tone is huge.
Inflection. It changes how you talk about it, how you communicate it, and that informs your words. And that's really, because I'm just thinking of like a communicator that I look up to a lot is Ray, our former senior pastor at Emmanuel Nashville. Gifted communicator. Rarely does he talk about his past experiences and some of the sufferings and some of the things that God brought him through. I mean, rarely. And yet it clearly informed his communication, and he kept his communication on point and in the Word and focused on God. But I don't think you would have gotten that type of communication without some of his experiences and suffering, some of the things that God brought him through. But he wasn't talking about it very much, So that just seems to be like you can just pick up when someone has experienced something or not, whether they talk about it or not.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I want to try to communicate this effectively, but it reminds me of an ex-slave in Alabama a long, long time ago speak of what makes a good song leader on a chain gang, right? He has to keep a certain rhythm is key, because they would all sing it together, hum it together, to stay on rhythm, to sling the hammers at the same time. But he was being interviewed, and the guy said, does he have to have a good voice? And he said, no. He said he just has to have lived a lot of life. He's got to be able to sing through pain. He said, he said it like, he said, well, I guess you could have the voice that would impress St. Peter at the gate. But if you haven't experienced life, you can't be a song leader. And it was a powerful interview.
Yes.
But I think that's the same way when you haven't experienced pain, anxiety, fear, trouble, when life has flicked you in the face but not punched you in the gut yet, your preaching lacks a certain depth, because there's too much that's theoretical.
Right.
But when you've buried a sister when you've buried a child, when you have had lengthy hospitalizations of family, when you have been in and out of divorce talks, but determined to stay together, when you've got a wayward younger prodigal in your home, when there's these things that keep you up at night and devastate you, when you lose someone to heart disease, when you lose someone to cancer, leukemia, these terms take on a significance, and this suffering becomes very real. You don't have to theorize your pain. So when you preach about anxiety, don't be anxious about anything. Prayer and supplication, let your request be made unto God. Let's trust Him, y'all. Like, instead, it's like, this is a hard verse for anyone who's gone through a lot of suffering. And letting that pain inform that verse as you communicate it. And if you've lived life and it's hurt, you've been punched in the gut, breath knocked out of you, it is so noticeable to your people as you preach through really anything, but especially on trouble, compared to this fresh new guy coming in and he says the right things, maybe the same things, but the look in his eye, the tone in his voice, how flippant maybe he says certain things, how fast he goes through the things that took you a long time to say. That communicates a lot, and I would not want to be good at that without going through those things.
Yeah, and that's a great example of how God brings beauty from ashes. And I just think of the verse 2 where it's like, in all things, God is working for our good for those who love Him, because for the preacher who's going through those things, or the person who's going through those awful, hard events in life, suffering, the pain, the hardship, the questions, the uncertainty, the fear, and then later that having an actual real benefit to other people. You know, I mean, that's how God works. And you can't get it any other way. You know, like that's
James 1 talks about trials, right? And that trial produces steadfastness, right?
Yeah,
exactly. And that steadfastness is to produce greater faith. And if you want to understand steadfastness, you're not going to find it through comfort. If you want to be steady and poised in trouble, it's not going to come from the beach. It's going to come from a storm.
Yes,
you're going to be weathered. It's the young guy panicking, and you look at the old seaman, and he's just poised. His eyes are set to the horizon. He's going to face this storm. He's seen worse. He's going to get through it. There's a difference there. But that trial is what creates the endurance. It's like the athlete who trains hard. It's not through sitting on the couch that makes him a better athlete.
Yes.
He's pushing himself through intentional trial to run farther, to run faster, to lift more weights. It's not through just chilling out that you become stronger.
Yes. Yeah, I'm thinking there was a guy that we were hiking in the desert in Arizona the end of last week, and he lost his son years ago. I think his son was 18, and because of losing his son, he changed some focus. He was a businessman, and he started to put some time in other areas and events and things like that. And, at one event, 200 guys committed their lives to the Lord, and then another event, 150. And then we're hiking in the desert, and he's become a close friend because he understands pain and suffering at a deep, deep level. And now he's ministering to us. We had a tough year in 2019, and now he is, because of having experienced that, not only have, at this point, it's hundreds of people have committed their life to the Lord based on his decisions after that, losing his son and some of the things he orchestrated and the events he was a part of. Of course, it's God working through him. But now in just a very practical, real way, now my wife and I are experiencing benefits from, he and his wife, because they lost their son, and he's hiking in the desert. They've been going out there since I mean, he took the son that they lost, has hiked out there tons of times. They've been going out there since the early 80s. And now the desert has really become like meaningful to him because it's a place where, as we're hiking in October there, a lot of things are dead. It's very barren and everything, but you go out there in the spring and it's very lush and green. And so it's just this cycle of death unto life and just this rugged beauty that he is attracted to that now. Like he's drawn to the desert because of that cycle of death unto life. And so when you hike the desert with someone like that, as opposed to someone who hasn't experienced much pain or suffering at all, their thoughts on the desert, and their the benefits that you get to experience selfishly, from him. I mean, there's a depth there that you can't get except for pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And experiencing that
Yeah.
and hanging on to God through that. And it knocked him on his butt for a couple of years. I mean, I think he laid on the couch for a year or two after his son died. You know what I mean? It's nothing like he just marched through that victoriously. I mean, it laid him over for a period of time. And, but he refused to, give up and eventually, and then the Lord really worked through that. So there is so much suffering, it's hard to kind of, it's hard to sort of wrap your head around like why so much suffering, and yet here we are talking about the benefits that other people can experience from suffering.
Yeah, G.K. Chesterton went through a lot of stuff, and he said something to the effect of the greatest thing you can experience in this life is good health and the blessing of God, except illness. Like illness was better.
Wow.
Because of the way that it informs you and teaches you, the way that the trial is able. Spurgeon says, "I've learned to kiss kiss the wave that throws me upon the rock of ages." Right? It is.
Wow.
The trial is what produces grit or steadfastness in our faith, and it provides hope if we're willing. Which James 1 talks about this, if we're willing to pray for wisdom to see it that way. And the meekness, which is a word that James uses there, the meekness to receive the trial as something that the Lord is using, because it's not wasted. That's something that's beautiful from James 1. It's not like your trial is producing steadfastness. It's not meaningless.
Yes.
It is providing something. It's not wasted. Your hurt isn't wasted. Your hurt is making you stronger, and it is in some way advancing the glory of God, revealing His glory. Even the illness of remember the man who was blind and he was healed, and the Pharisees interviewed the parents, saying, before the healing, I think, was, does this parents, is it their fault that he's blind, a sin that they committed that he's blind, or is it his sin that he's blind? Because there was association with, if your life's bad, it's because of sin. And Jesus said, neither. It was so that the glory of the Lord be revealed through him. Man, that's a hard trial to go through. Blindness is a hard trial.
Yeah.
But according to Jesus, disabilities in general, blindness in this one particular example, illnesses, trials, sickness, it is for God's glory to be revealed.
Yes.
In that. And that has changed the way I've looked at special needs children. It's changed the way I've looked at people going through trial. I'm wanting to see, maybe I can be one of the guys that gets a glimpse of God's glory through this young child. Maybe today He's going to manifest His glory in some way through this person's illness. And maybe I get to be one of the ones that get to see that.
Yes.
So instead of looking away awkwardly, I look with love and opportunity at, man, is it going to be today that this child is going to flex and God's glory is going to be seen?
Yeah, I love that. There was just someone on the podcast in the last 2 weeks, Victoria. She had a sister, younger, she couldn't talk and she couldn't move. I forget what the illness that she had.
Cerebral palsy.
And keep in mind, she couldn't move and she couldn't talk. And yet, Victoria and everyone in the family, all of her friends, everyone, like they got so much love from her. Like she emitted so much love. How do you emit love when you can't move and you can't talk? And yet she did, So here's this sort of this invalid person, and yet teaching the family and friends, like the most of the people that you knew, like this person taught you the most about love. She was the most loving. So that's God like working in a weakness, and then there is an element of trust that's needed that our suffering won't be wasted. Back to that verse in James, because sometimes we just have to realize that that verse is in the Bible. God put it there. It's true, and we rely on that, because in the moment, we can't see it. We can't see how. I mean, I often feel like, God wouldn't waste your suffering and your suffering, but there's a good chance he'll waste mine. You know what I mean? But that's just as true for me as it is for you and Andrew. Yeah. It's in the Bible. It's true for everyone. And then there's that element of perspective, and someone, said it like this at one point, which is like, if we have a piece of art on that wall over there, and then we walk over to that wall and press our nose on the concrete block, and there's just all this art around us, and we can't see it because our nose is pressed against the concrete block. But we back up a little bit, or give it a little bit more time, from that awful experience or that suffering or whatever that is that happens in life. A little bit of time goes by, and you see more of it, and you step back more, and you see more of the art and more of the beauty, and you step back. And but to keep in mind that in this life, we never see the full artwork, Matter of fact, we probably don't see very much of it at all. But then you have God who sees the full work of art on that wall. And so just kind of, that was helpful for me with realizing when you're really going through something, hey man, at this point, your nose is pressed against the wall, or it's an inch or two away. Like you don't see what's going on. But you have to trust that there is a bigger picture that you're just not seeing. Yeah. It's there.
Great. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Do you want any bourbon, or are you good?
I like bourbon. I like Scotch. Scotch is my
jam.
you
do like Scotch. Try some of this Kentucky Owl if you like Scotch. This is pretty. I think it's of these two here. This is a guy in Nashville, actually, a really cool guy. That, but this is a Kentucky bourbon, and if you like Scotch, I think you'll like it.
Awesome, thank you.
Changing subjects a little bit, but you put a lot of time and effort into exercise and keeping your body healthy and all of that. So sometimes, I don't know that this is quite as popular as it used to be. Maybe I feel like hopefully it's not, but I feel like there sometimes is still this sentiment that, how does there's a verse that talks about, working on this is butchering it, but like working on your body is good, but
Timothy, bodily exercises of some gain.
Yes, but
godliness and holiness is of gain in this life and life to come.
Exactly. Yeah. So
1 Timothy 4:8.
There you go.
Okay, yes. Do you have the verse there or no? Can you read it?
I do. Well, I have it in my notes. Let me pull it up real quick.
That's right. That's right. He knows what we're talking about. My point is that it seems like sometimes in Christian circles, the value that's put on physical health is less than non-Christian circles.
Is value. Yeah, that's the word that ESV use, I think.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, exercise of some value.
Yeah. So, which I think is unfortunate that sometimes as Christian people, we kind of poo-poo the value of physical health and all of that. But I'm curious to hear you talk to it. Why do you spend so much time and effort, trying to stay decently in shape? What is the value there from a kind of from a Christian worldview? How do you look at that?
Yeah. It is something I've been pursuing since 2016, July 8th, I believe. 2016 is when I decided to pursue better health. I was 300 plus. The highest I ever weighed was 310, I believe, in 10th grade.
In 10th grade?
Yeah. I was 119 and entering into 3rd grade. Always a really big kid.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Is your brother and your dad big too?
No, my dad. Well, my dad's just he's got a strong build.
Okay.
He played football at App State. My brother is, man, he could swing from trees. He can jump. He pole vaulted.
Wow.
In NCAA school. Never did that until he got to college and was running. And the track coach recruited him, said, "You want to pole vault?" He's never done it. And then he ended up getting some awards in the Big South Conference. But anyway, they're not big. I was by far the biggest of my family. And to be clear, the fattest is what I mean by biggest, not strongest. But yeah, I just knew it wasn't. Here's where it came from. In 2014, I started reading through the Bible every year. And so 2016, July, was 2.5 years into this thing. And the way I see it is the Word was just beginning to highlight certain things along the way. And that was one of them. I preached to the city of Nashville. I preached at downtown Nashville, Tennessee. And we've got skeptics and agnostics and seekers and those who have been wounded by pastors and churches that gathered at our church. And it's got to be troubling for them, for me, for a pastor to be talking about a particular issue to be repented of, a sin to be repented of. When here I am on stage at 300 pounds, pounding, fried chicken, not caring about the sin of gluttony. But I'm definitely going to be concerned about their sin in this sermon. That's got to be troubling and confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And as it should be. They're doing intellectual work. They're discerning, right? And I wanted to be better qualified for preaching and pastoring. I wanted to be healthier. I wanted to live longer, right? I want to be in heaven, but I want to be here as long as God wants me here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be an unhealthy example or a sick or unhealthy grandparent not able to enjoy preaching the gospel in front of my grandkids and great-grandkids. I want to know my great-grandkids, my grandfather, he passed away in January of this year, and he was 87.
Your grandfather?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
And so he was able to know his great-grandchildren.
Yeah.
He had an 18-year-old great-grandson.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating, But it's because he was a healthy man, and he's why I take vitamins.
Oh, wow.
He's why I take multiple fiber supplements every day. He's the one why I take all the vitamins that I take. I try to implement as much as he did. I try to do, because he lived full of years, happy. He lived full of knowledge. His brain was with him until it was with the Lord.
Wow.
And 87 years old. He never weighed more than 218 as an adult. Never weighed less than 214. He always tried to be 215. Yeah, and so it was always a matter of control for him, self-control. And there was nothing off limits. He would eat and enjoy anything and everything. But he would make sure that his weight stayed around 215. And so just trying to model that, mirror that. Our bodies are a lot alike. And so I'm thinking, man, if he was zoned in at 215, and that was what he felt like was healthy, and he lived all this time, and he was an athlete, played pro baseball, like he's an awesome guy. But I have a bigger build than him. I'm 1.5 inches taller than him, and I've got a lot more muscle because he didn't work out. There was very little working out in baseball in the 50s.
Sure.
So very little. There was much more of drinking this than working out baseball in the 50s, and it's how he got a lot of his money was through liquor.
What do you mean through liquor?
Well, he was just paid in meals,
Sponsorships?
and because back then you had like leagues instead of like minor league. It was just you had like Triad League, Carolina League,
Oh, okay.
Tennessee, Kentucky League, and so it was basically this local ball until the majors.
Gotcha.
And so he ended up signing with the Phillies, but he played mostly Carolina League. He could hit some dingers, though, man.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he has one. The Charlotte Observer marked it at 595 feet.
Holy moly.
I believe the longest one's 601 feet, the longest home run.
That's
ever.
out there, man.
Yeah.
That is out there.
Yeah. So
I mean, you picture a Major League Baseball stadium with like 450 feet. That's pretty common to the fence, right?
no, well, like 350, 330.
Is it just
Yeah,
350, 330? I thought that was
yeah.
more like softball. But
No, I mean it's they vary.
Dang, that's so far.
Yeah,
Golly.
I'd say 400. There might be some fields that are deeper, maybe just a little bit.
I feel like the Yankees had at least part of their field was up to close to 400, but
the corners is where it usually pulls in a little bit.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, and I had old guys talking about him, telling me stories about him because they watched him play ball and stuff.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Fascinating memories that I have. But yeah, he pursued health, and so that made a big impact on me to see him live as long as he did, and try to emulate some of the things that he did. And then the disqualifying factor. I just didn't want people to I didn't want to present a stumbling block of other than the gospel. And I felt like my weight was a stumbling block. And now I love to help pastors who might even be hearing this and they're just like, wow, that resonates. Like, I don't want to do that either. I love helping pastors figure this thing out, training them and encouraging them, coaching them along the way. Because I feel like if I could change, anybody could change. If I could get in shape, anybody can.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, if that's how you feel, that's very hopeful for other people. I mean, that's the message someone wants to hear if they're dealing with a particular thing and trying to change, is for someone that feels like, hey, if I can do it, you can too.
Yeah.
How do you help pastors through? Like, where do you start? You start diet, you start exercise. What are some of your recommendations?
Read the Bible every day. There's most pastors don't read the Bible except for sermons. And so I encourage them to get to reading the Bible every day because I feel like my change in health flowed from my spiritual health. My physical health flowed from my spiritual health.
And that's interesting because that's going exactly against what I was saying with some of this cultural Christianity thing with like kind of poo-pooing health. So maybe that's more of a nominal Christian. Maybe that's a misunderstanding of the Scripture, not a thorough understanding of the Scripture. So when you actually get in the Word, then it's interesting for you. Getting in the Word prompted that physical health.
For sure. And, to be clear, when Paul told Timothy, he said bodily exercise has value. Like, he didn't say it's stupid.
Yeah.
He didn't say don't do it. He didn't say it's ridiculous compared to this. He says, no, it's got its place.
Yep.
And so that should, if anything, that should pull us in to be more active. It shouldn't be like, well, he just said it's kind of non-consequential. Let's just move on. Mm-hmm. That's not what he said. He said it's a value. So I think that's important. But yeah, I start with reading the Bible every day as like, here's where if you're not doing that, I really don't know how to help you. If you're not willing to pursue the Lord, I mean, there's so much that he does in your heart, because for me, food was an idol. It wasn't a mere habit. And so I had to have my heart addressed, and that came through the Word. And this is hindsight now. I didn't know it, but this is how the Spirit was working in my life. So when I look back at this, I can see that. But in the middle of it, I was just reading my Bible, and I just started caring about what foods I ate. I didn't even know there was a correlation there.
Mm-hmm. Was it an idol or an escape?
Both. I think a lot of idols are escapes.
Yeah.
But it was I love flavor. I love being full. I love abundance. Mm-hmm. I don't like ever being hungry. So I would go to it as a way of coping, but also just enjoying the pleasure. Eat, drink today, be merry. A lot of that. But starting with Scripture, leading to making better choices as I saw that it was an idol in my heart, and running to Jesus in those moments and reminding myself of my gospel identity provided through the finished work of Jesus, and who God says I am and what he has for me, and how what he has is so much better than anything I'll ever find in food. And what it did is it freed me to enjoy food instead of worship it. And so I saw it as just fuel. Food is just fuel, right? So when you eat a meal, all it is supposed to do, like scientifically perhaps, you could say it is, the only thing it has to do is energize you, fuel you, supply your body with nutrients for you to thrive for the next 6 to 8 hours. That's all it is. We make it a lot more than that. I was making it much more than that. It was my fulfillment, not just fuel, right? And so I was going after it for something that it was never intended to give me.
Yeah.
So of course it led to unhealth. Of course it led to, abusing food by just hurting myself, and so, man, I've been dieting since Tommy Lasorda told me to, through a commercial, to take Slim Fast in like 85. I was second grade on Slim Fast.
Oh, wow.
Because back then you couldn't play football if you weighed more than 109. And so I got down to like 112, and I couldn't play football. I remember the coach telling my dad, well, your son can play for the junior high. I just left second grade. But I was weighing the average. I weighed as much as the average seventh grader.
Wow.
And so I was like, well, I'm done with football till, junior high, because I'm not going to play with those big guys, even though I was their size.
Yeah. Now, is that because you were eating too much or the wrong kinds of foods back then, or was that just your body?
I was not aware of any wisdom in food selection.
Okay, so you're eating whatever you wanted doing Slim Fast.
When I did Slim Fast, I did begin to try to make better food choices according to what Slim Fast said was supposed to work.
But it wasn't working, or you didn't start soon enough?
Right. It didn't start soon enough, I believe, because I went from like 119 down to 112, and it just didn't work. But so I started exercising in 2016 a lot, and started watching my foods. Each time I would order food or prepare food, I tried to use smaller plates, and I call it gospeling myself before I would order, and reminding myself, Jeremy, all you have to do is supply enough food to get by. That's all you got to do. There's another meal coming, bro. You don't have to get it all right here. Just get enough. And so instead of me spending $15 for myself at Chick-fil-A, I was back to spending, $5. So it saved a lot of money. Or actually, that money transferred to supplements.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
You're right.
Like vitamins and things.
Yep.
Not steroids. Supplements, when you're talking health, can imply a lot of other things. But I noticed for me, and everybody's different. And so as I thought about my weight loss journey, because leaving my junior year of high school into my senior year of high school, I dropped 115 pounds in those 3 months as a radical weight loss. And I had a lot of fun after that. I could dunk a basketball. I could slide into second base. I made it to second base. It was awesome, man.
Yeah. 115 pounds in 3 months.
Yeah. And that was I
don't think I've ever heard of that.
7 liters of water and 1 fig Newton. And working 8 to 9 hours a day in a greenhouse at 132 controlled temperature, high humidity room.
Jeepers.
And then come home and play ball for 3 hours. That's how I did it.
Dang, that'll do it.
And everybody says, most people that I talk to, they're like, man, that's not healthy. I'm like, well, neither's being 315 pounds.
Yeah.
But along the way, man, I've been on so many fad diets. I mean, honestly, if you mention it, like I've done it, and I've lost weight on it. But it's not sustainable because I was trying to find a fix without going to what could actually fix it. Right. And I never went to the heart. I was just thinking about the stomach. And it's a heart issue. Most things are. But I realized I just try to think through my body type and understand kind of how I lost weight. Like, what was it about those different fad diets that helped me lose weight? And none of them required much moderation. Most of them said, eat whatever off this list. And so I would just consume thousands of calories off that list. And that's not how you lose weight sustainably.
That makes sense. Yep.
So I realized I just needed to cut grains, like breads, carbs, complex carbs, and like noodles, pasta, things like that. And dairy, I had to cut dairy down. And I had to cut, what was the other one? Dairy, grain, and I want to say sugar. Any other form of sugar. And other than natural, like apples and things like that. So like cereal, that's grain. dairy, and sugar.
Yeah. No pasta.
Right. But
Yep.
now here's the thing. I can eat anything. And I've been doing this for 5 years. And so it's like, it's been proven, like through my experience, that this actually works. But it's just limiting. It's learning to limit and discern what you eat. Again, it goes back to how we started with self-control.
Yeah.
I'm not giving you a list to say, eat whatever you want to off this list. Just stay away from this list. Right? Cancel culture type of idea. Instead, I'm like, no, we're going to learn self-control here. I'm going to help disciple you. When you go out to eat, your family's doing pizza, order a side salad, use oil and vinegar, no more than a tablespoon of vinegar or of oil. Throw some salt and pepper, some seasoning. See if they got other flavors in the back of some dry rub stuff you can use, and mix it up. Let it be a delicious side salad or a full salad, and then get some chicken wings. Get 8, 10 chicken wings. You don't need the ranch, and enjoy that, man. And if you want a piece of pizza, take a piece of pizza, usually cut it in half, or since I'm only eating one piece of pizza, I'll cut off and eat the heart of that slice of pizza, like to the point. It's like the most beautiful part of the pizza.
Okay.
and
you'll just eat that?
I'll just enjoy
and not
that
the rest of the
pizza.
piece.
Right.
Okay.
Or 3 or 4 pieces like I used to, and the wings and the salad and everything doused in ranch.
Yeah.
And so I can eat whatever I want to eat. I lost, when I went through most of my weight loss, I was eating ice cream every night. But it was just like a teaspoon of ice cream. But I learned to enjoy ice cream instead of just by habit having that cold, creamy taste satisfy me at night. Instead, it was just, let me enjoy this and just a little bit.
I see.
And so I can eat whatever. It's just using
now,
wisdom and moderation and self-control.
I see. So currently you'll eat whatever.
Yeah.
You're just going to use wisdom and moderation and self-control. Yeah. So when you cut out the grains.
Or limit.
Sure.
Limit grains.
Okay.
Limit dairy.
Okay. So you still limit those things.
Absolutely.
And then more than protein or some other things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I see.
Throw down on protein.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So currently do you eat until you're full with protein, or you have a certain daily calorie count that you want to stay under?
I don't think calorie count personally. Part of that is because I burn so much in my workouts that I would have to be really foolish to eat more than I burn.
Yeah,
because I burn a lot of calories.
Okay,
but I still don't try to eat till I'm full. I just eat till when it's enough. And there's times where I'll be like, man, I've been drifting for about 2 or 3 weeks, and I've been hammering it, and I've expanded my stomach, and I've noticed I've been eating more. I've been going back for seconds. Seconds is usually, if you go back for seconds, that's a sign that you need to pull back. And I would say that if you're going to go back for seconds out of a habit, then always start out with a much smaller plate and then go back for seconds.
I see. Yep.
It's a psychological thing as much as anything, really.
Yep. How much would you say of you staying healthy now, getting to a better weight, how much would you say is diet and how much would you say is exercise, or is it just 100% for both?
I think one feeds into the other.
I agree with that.
I think they're both very important. And so I would say 50-50 if you want to do that.
Yep.
When you're working out, you don't want to go mess up your workout by eating
for sure
4 pieces of pizza.
Exactly. Yep.
Yep. And then if you're eating healthy, you want to capitalize on that by having a great workout. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So if I'm going to exercise self-control and work out and eat really healthy today.
Yep.
I want to get in a good workout to where I burn that much more.
Yep.
And I get stronger. Yep. And so it begins to feed each other. It
totally feeds that into each other for me too. Yeah. What is your workout regimen or cadence?
Yeah. I lift weights, upper body, 2 days a week. And this
just at home?
At home.
You have you have a bench, you have some weights?
I just have free weights.
Okay.
They go, it's one of those
kettlebells?
Track. It's like 2 dumbbells that go from 5 pounds all the way up to 50 pounds.
Oh, I see.
With pins.
Okay, sure.
And they go 2.5 pound increments all the way up.
Okay.
I think it's like $250. I got it as a Christmas present.
Okay.
I love it. It's awesome. And then I've got some other, like I've got a curl bell. I don't have any kettlebell. I got a big tire that I flip. I've got smaller weights that are easier to grab than using the pin system. And I've got a treadmill that a buddy gave to me from his Planet Fitness. They were getting rid of it. And so my regimen is basically I like to run 1 to 4 miles every day. So like if I do an upper body workout, I'll just run a mile as fast as I can. Today, it was my first upper body workout since COVID. So I ran 3.6, and then I did the full upper body workout just because I was trying to really get back on track.
Yeah.
And from COVID. But before COVID and where I'm going now is I either run 3.5 miles or more, and that's my workout. Or I'll run a mile and then do an upper body workout.
Mm-hmm.
And then I use the Beachbody app. It's $100 a year, and you get access to the videos of all their training videos,
Oh, okay.
And
It's all
that's
body weight stuff mostly?
body weight and dumbbells.
I see.
Yeah. If you've got a 25 and a 15, or if you've got a 15 and a 10, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot to fatigue. At least for most guys starting out, it takes a while. Don't buy a lot of equipment. Earn your equipment. Like let that be an incentive.
Mm-hmm.
Like do this workout until it's easy, and then buy the weights.
I see.
Don't look at those 15 pounds and think, man, I can do more than that. It's like, no. Do this for 3 months first.
Yeah.
And then let it be a reward.
Yep.
And side note on dress is like always wear a belt. If you're trying to lose weight, always wear a belt. Always wear tight clothes. Like don't go stretchy pants.
Okay.
Don't go jogging pants. Don't go athletic pants.
Yeah.
If you're trying to lose weight, keep that reminder
Yeah.
of that tension that won't give.
Mm-hmm.
Non-stretchy jeans.
Yep.
Go with the old Levi's.
Just that top of mind sort of keeping it aware, like you want to lose weight so that this either fits or looks better or that
absolutely.
makes sense.
Yeah. Don't buy extra size. If you're going to buy new clothes right now and you want to lose weight, buy something that's too tight.
I see. Yep.
Just a little too tight.
Yep.
Not too tight, but just a snug.
Yeah.
And earn your way into that being comfortable.
Absolutely.
So I went from a 2X to a large is how my shirts have changed. And I went from a tight 42 to a very loose 36. And so that's like sizes.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, this is the first time in my life, struggling with weight my whole life. It's the first time I actually changed my BMI, because I could do crash diets and lose weight, but my body mass index didn't change a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I just got flabby. I didn't get fit.
Right.
So
and the key difference is you're changing your lifestyle. That's kind of what I'm picking up on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is part of my life. And of course there's family tensions. There's like different events that I've got to go here and there. And working out has to be handled open-handed sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times, like there was one time I caught a flight. I had to leave the house at like 4:30 to fly to LA. I think it was in February of this year. Got to watch the Lakers play. It was fun.
Cool.
One of the last NBA games that was possible. And before that, I was like, man, I'm going to be on a plane. I want to work out first. So I got up extra early and at like 3:00 to run my 3.5 miles. Because I wanted to sit on that plane and sit the rest of the day if I wanted to, knowing I got it in that day.
Wow.
Because I knew I was going to be sitting and doing nothing to burn calories.
Yep.
So there's ways that you can stop making excuses and actually put in the work.
Yes.
Yep. So for me, getting up early means going to bed early.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people want to stay up late and have a lot of fun, eat whatever they want to, and then they don't feel right the next morning.
Yep.
Working out or getting up early. It makes sense, but it does take a life change,
Yep.
So 2 upper body workouts a week, several miles, usually around between 25 and 30 miles that I'll run in a given week, and intense, high intensity interval training with Sean T and the Beachbody app that I was talking about, where I do Speed 2.0, Office T25 workout, Speed 3.0, and like core cardio. those are the 3 workouts I use there. And then I use an upper body workout from Lift 4. And then I use an upper body workout from 21 Day Fix. If you're going to get into Beachbody at all, as far as like the app goes, you don't need there's no subscription. There's no like you have to get this Shakeology or anything like that. I'm not pushing that. I don't sell that. But I do love the app because it opens up a lot of opportunities, from Pilates to like you name it.
Oh, okay.
Gives you tons of opportunities to work out different ways. But if you're going to start and you're like, I want to start somewhere, where do I start? Man, the 21 Day Fix program is a 7-day-a-week program. It is phenomenal. I did that for my first 3 years of my diet and my life change.
You just kept repeating it every 7 days?
Every 7 days.
Oh, wow.
And there's a line in there where she says, it's Autumn Calabri, I think's her name. She's the trainer, and she says, you give me 21 days, and I'm going to give you the body that you've always wanted, right? I gave her 3 years. And
wow.
I'm not there yet. But,
yeah,
the point is it does provide a significant head-to-toe level of muscular cardiovascular health.
Okay, yep.
And so if you do any workout, I would encourage you to start there and do that for 21 days, if not 42 days. Honestly, it's such a great program. You could do it for 3 years like I did and longer. But it does get you, it's awesome, head-to-toe workout. It includes Pilates, like a mat class, legs, upper body, lower body, backs, arms, cardio. It's all-encompassing, 7 days.
How much time a day do you allocate to this? An hour? Is this Shakeout's about an hour a day? Is it more or less?
I base my workouts on my calendar. Right, so I had a little bit more time this morning. That's why I did the running and the lifting.
I see.
Some days I've got an early meeting, and I'm going to get up early, and I'm going to do that 25-minute Shaun T workout with T25 and do speed 2.0. Because I know it. I can get through it. It's 25 minutes. Otherwise, I'm running on the treadmill for 30 minutes. That's an extra 5 minutes. So if I'm pushed for time, I won't run. I'll do a T25 workout. All of them are 25 minutes. And then if I've got a little extra time, I love to run on Monday mornings because I've got a TV in front of my treadmill, and I love to catch up on all the football. And so like Sports Center has been lame this week so far because of it's been pretty much just baseball, which it's fun, but there's only so much you can talk about baseball.
Right.
So I didn't enjoy running this morning because I was just like thumbing through so many segments that I just didn't enjoy.
Well, why is that? Because there was NFL this weekend, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was last night. There was Monday Night Football. So I ran yesterday and caught up on all the football.
Oh, got it.
But then this morning, for instance, it was the Bears and Rams.
I see.
And there's only so much you can talk about the Rams and Bears.
Right.
And so like I love Sunday running on Sundays because you get to catch up on all the college football, Monday mornings because of all the NFL. But then it's really little, spread out throughout the week. So there's certain shows I try to watch, or if I'm trying to learn something, like this year, I've tried to learn a lot more about general anxiety disorder, GAD, and so I would watch a seminar on that to redeem that time on the treadmill type of thing, because I don't like wasting time. I like to multitask to get a lot done. But to answer your question, 25 minutes some days, which ends up being 30. Some days 30 minutes, which ends up being 35. And then on the lift days, it's usually close to an hour with the running the mile, and then doing the video, and then extra. I always like to do extra. It's like, man, if I've already pushed myself this far to build this strength, I want to do some extra, just random workouts.
Okay,
just different lifts to try to build while I'm bulking.
Yep. It's crazy how much you can get done in averages, call it 45 minutes a day, even just 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And then how quickly you can burn 45 minutes on a evening watching a random show, or, scrolling through social media, or getting lost in the interwebs, or, all of that. So I'm surprised to hear that some of those workouts are only 25, 30 minutes long, and it seems to be effective. So
yeah, and there's longer ones for sure that you can have there. The beautiful thing about the app is you can put in how much time you have, what type of workout you're looking for, and your goal, and it'll just sort out everything and say, well, here's the 5 to choose from.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's awesome like that. I don't like to do certain workouts after working out upper body the day before. And I don't
Sure.
do a lot of lower body workout
Okay.
because there's some lower body workout in every video that I do.
Yep.
And I'm running that much.
Yep.
And I'm not trying to, squat a lot. I've been big my whole life. I'm trying to squat less.
Sure.
Like I was breaking records squatting weight because of my size in high school.
Yep.
And high school records,
Mm-hmm.
not anything else, which is not worth a tattoo, I can promise you. But anyway, I've got a picture of sort of like a before and after to show you. I know you can't see it on
Dang.
YouTube,
Wow. That is, I'm sure we probably can't see that, Andrew.
Bring it close.
Bring it close to the camera.
Yeah.
You want it up here?
Little to the left. Other way. Perfect.
yeah, it's a big,
Thank you.
That's a big jump, man.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
thanks, man.
Yeah.
It's,
Wow.
Yeah.
It even looks like your eyes change color. You know what I mean? It must be just the way the picture is.
Yeah.
What
And,
year were each of those there?
The first one was actually, I'm sorry, it wasn't July of 2016. It was July of 2015.
Okay.
At 7:47 a.m.
Okay.
And that's my first
yeah.
before picture, and that's like a busted can of biscuits is what I like to talk about.
I mean, your face does not even really
I was
look like...
miserable.
Really?
Yeah. Oh,
Just felt
man.
miserable?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Just no energy, depressed, just what? Just
unhappy. Like when I see that picture, I'm upset because I know I'm a man of principle. And I did not like that I had no self-control, no principle, just continue to buy larger clothes without addressing the problem and enabling. Just, I mean, it's, you wake up defeated,
okay.
like you got to hold your breath when you put your socks on.
Okay.
Or you just can't breathe actually.
Yep.
But it feels like holding your breath. And just, I mean, for me, I didn't want to be the dad that my kids were kind of like embarrassed of,
Mm-hmm.
Not that they would be necessarily, but I just felt not like a failure necessarily, but like, why would anybody aspire to be like me?
Yeah. What age were you in that
You know?
picture?
That would have been, I was 35, 36 maybe.
So you were 36 years old. You were my age then. And now, you said 41 or 42?
41.
And now at 41, you're healthier, fitter, feeling better.
Than any other time in my life.
Wow.
By far.
Yeah, that is encouraging.
Yeah, I could go run a 5K in 26 minutes right now.
Yep.
Like easily.
Yep.
When I started, it would take me probably 15 minutes to get a mile out, and most of it would be walking, and that'd be as fast as I could get. That's like borderline heart attack.
Wow. Yeah.
And I would sweat a ton. Like I always sweat a lot.
Yeah.
I sweat a lot, and but it was just a problem preaching.
Mm-hmm. You're out of breath, sweating too much,
out of breath, and just dripping sweat everywhere. It shut off my iPad one time in the middle of a wedding. My sweat just froze my iPad because it felt like it was discerning my sweat as a finger on the screen.
Wow.
And it was just like there were drops everywhere.
Yep.
And the more I touched it, it just literally just shut off.
Yeah. Huh. So when you're talking to pastors now that are struggling with weight or health, those types of things, are you pitching them on the benefits of just you're going to feel better, you're going to be more effective, you're going to be a better steward of your body, you're going to have more mental clarity? What are you telling them would be the benefits of why they should be interested in putting some time into exercise and changing what they're eating and how much and all of that?
Yeah.
Like what's in it for them?
Yeah. That was from
Oh, nice.
weeks ago.
From how long ago?
4 weeks ago. It was
Oh,
before COVID.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow.
Got the macho man.
Yeah, you're definitely you're lifting some weights for sure. You got these good muscles right here.
Yeah, the traps.
Is that what that is?
Veins popping out.
Yeah, for sure.
Never had that before.
Very nice.
And over the last couple of years, I've been typing and stuff, and actually been startled at the veins popping up on my hand because I've never seen veins my whole life. I've never seen them.
Oh, okay.
You know? And I would be typing and be like, oh, I would literally be startled. I'm like, oh, wow,
that's
there's
funny.
a vein. What do you know? No, I don't really have to tell guys a lot.
Okay.
You know, when they reach out to me, they know it already.
Okay. They know they need to change. They know there's benefits in being more healthy. And
and until you are like willing to try anything and really upset at yourself, until they look like I did in the eyes of that before picture in 2015, I can't help them. Yep. They you have to hit a certain rock bottom of disgust.
Okay.
I call it sick of it, you know. You just got to be completely sick of it.
Yeah.
And the first thing I ask them that they do, like if we're talking face to face like this, I'll be like, so I want you to go in that room and I want you to take your shirt and your pants off and take a picture. And I want you to text it to me and I want you to make it your background on your phone. And I want you to do that for the next 3 months.
What do you mean every day, or keep it as a backdrop?
Keep it as a background
for the next 3 months. Okay.
And text it to me. And because part of it is that I've learned is you've got to be honest. Don't suck in. Look at who you are. Zoom in on that picture. Look around. Like, look at yourself in the eyes. You know, you take the front shot and the side shot. You know, like, don't run from this. This is who you are. Don't pretend. Because until you're honest and sick at what you see and how you feel, there's no program that's going to work. But I think if you're honest and you're actually sick of it, any program will work.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's key.
And so part of sending it to me is admitting it. It's kind of like confessing it. This is true for me. And some guys are like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. It's like, I won't necessarily say this, but I'll be like, well, you're just not sick of it yet, is what I think.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
You don't want to change yet.
Yep. Yeah, that's that I think is so true, and I think it's the most important thing when it comes time to a change like that. And that's exactly where I was at this spring, man. I mean, 2019 was a bad year, and my health went to crap, and I was eating crap, and I don't put on weight, but I got fat and soft, I got like a little belly and soft and not
pudgy,
strong, and pudgy, and didn't feel good. Wasn't in a good place mentally, and just one Saturday for lunch, Mariana had, I mean, it wasn't even like bad food. It was like chicken sausage with quinoa and whatever. And I ate it and I just felt like crap. And I was sitting on the couch and I was just like, no, that's it. That's it. I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
I'm tired of feeling like crap.
Yeah.
And I'm tired of feeling sick all the time. And I'm tired of having no energy. And I'm tired of not like feeling that I'm strong and not looking like I know that I can look, and just feeling like a slob. And I'm done. I'm over it. Yeah. And finally need to get to that point to like make a change again.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable to change, right? It doesn't feel good to be hungry and to work out and to not have the foods that you're so used to. But look at where your feelings have gotten you. Don't trust your feelings. Yeah. Don't listen to that anymore.
Yeah.
You have to go by fact. Yeah. And that's where coaching comes in, is they just tell you, you know, here's what you're going to eat. Here's what you're going to do. And a lot of guys think of like the workout as like most guys that I help, it's not healthy for them to work out. Like they're so unhealthy. I would put them in the hospital if they took my advice. Like they're terribly unhealthy. And so my first advice is walk a mile with your wife at some point throughout the day, through your neighborhood or whatever. Just walk a mile. Don't walk fast. Enjoy it. Just slow walk it. Just get in a mile every day. And every time you change clothes, stop and do 30 seconds of push-ups. Even if you just get half of one and the rest is struggle for 30 seconds. Every time you change clothes. Do that for 3 weeks and call me. So by that time, you have walked, 28 miles. And you have done, I don't know how many seconds of push-ups that is, but I guarantee you're doing a better push-up.
Yeah.
You know, at the third week than you were the first day, because you've been trying this throughout every day that you've changed clothes.
Yeah.
And so that's an easy first step to like getting started.
Mm-hmm.
And so guys then hit me up and say, all right, so what's next? And that's where I'll kind of get more of a gauge on how much weight have you lost since then? How much, like, what are we looking like? Like, what are your numbers? You know, I try to get them to assess like their numbers. And then I cater based on their goals. And, you know, I talk about diet, and because some guys aren't affected by dairy. Some guys, it makes them gain weight.
Yeah.
You know, some guys can't process a lot of protein. So it takes adjusting certain things. You
Yes. And one of the, it's very common for people to not be able to process dairy properly. I feel like people are just kind of starting from scratch, and you just want to start to eliminate some things, man. Dairy and those carbs and pastas and that type of thing. I think those are some of like the top things to start. And well, obviously sugar, I guess that's sort of obvious, but those are some of those things to start cutting.
It's very common, right? Like I think it's across the board. If you're trying to lose weight, if you limit your grains, limit your dairy, limit your sugar, like you're going to lose weight.
Yes,
like,
get some fresh air and be active, and you are well on your way.
Man, I mean, and that's the thing is like we want it really fast. We want it really fast, and we want it to happen right now, and we want it to be easy. You know, there are easier steps to kind of get you there, but you can't be hard on yourself. It's going to take you a while. If it's taken you 35 years to get here, it might take you more than 3 weeks to get out of here.
That's right. Yes.
You know, like my grandpa would tell me, it's like it goes on one bite at a time. It's going to go off, you know, limiting yourself that bite.
Yeah.
And adding a drop of sweat.
Yeah.
You know, that's how it's going to come off.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And it's
so true.
It is so true.
Yep.
So true.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, what else? I don't want to keep you here all night. I mean, this is we've been going pretty strong here. This is fun. I really appreciate your time. I guess I'm kind of curious. You know, you are you're 40. You have teenage kids. You're a pastor at a church. You're in Nashville, Tennessee. It's 2020. There's COVID going on. There's political unrest and tension. With everything going on, where do you see if you're concerned, if you have any areas of concern for the state of the church, where are those areas of concern?
Biblical literacy. Illiteracy. People not reading their Bibles. Christians getting spoon-fed through podcasts, following their favorite preachers, but not their pastor. Not reading the Bible, expecting theology to come through song only and not through the Word, or through sermon only and not through the Word. You know, it's kind of like the same thing as diet and exercise. You know, it's like I want to be able to eat whatever I want and walk into a gym and walk back out and be healthier. I don't want to put in the work. I don't want to limit my diet. I want it to be easy. And, you know, there's a discipline to being healthy. There's a discipline to being spiritually healthy. And it's sad, and it really makes me concerned to think that you have to convince Christians to read the Bible. By definition, I think a Christian is one who longs for the pages of Scripture. But I think that we have so reduced, for fear of legalism maybe, or moralism, we've reduced the Christian life to a 5-minute devotion with God that you can get at the local bookstore, the ones that are still open. Or just show up to church on Sunday and give money and you're assumed to be healthy. If you ate one meal a week, even if it was loaded with nutrition, you're not going to be healthy, even if a sermon alone can produce health. There's absolutely the greatest issue facing the church today is professing Christians not being students and readers of Scripture. But more than that, probably the greater issue, even beyond that, is why that's the case. Like what's going on in their hearts. The answer isn't just for people to start reading their Bible more, necessarily. It's addressing the heart issue of why is it that you aren't a student of Scripture? Why is it that it's been months or years since you've read the Bible more than 2 or 3 weeks in a row? That would be a serious problem if we looked at physical food consumption like we do spiritual food consumption, we would be really concerned. We would call it a disorder. You have an eating disorder. But in the church, doesn't really get brought up much.
Mm-hmm.
So beyond, and that's been what's so hard with all the issues that we faced in 2020, from the social injustice and race tension and processing COVID and the division that we're so polarized politically. The tornadoes and Kobe dying, my papa dying, Regis Philbin, on and on. It's like, this has been Bob Gibson, old pitcher for the Cardinals. This has been crazy, man. This year is just, and I hate to use the term, but it's going to be permanent. It's going to be made permanent to 2020 is unprecedented, right?
Mm-hmm.
But all of the heartache that flows from those issues, and many of those issues themselves, addressing them only is trying to change the type of tree you have by simply knocking the fruit off the tree. You've got to go to the root. You've got to go to the root of the issue. Weed killer that you use, whether it be Roundup or whatever. You don't want something that just kills the leaf. If you look on it in big letters, other than this causes cancer, you'll see this goes to the root, kills the root. Right? That's what we're after when we're trying to get rid of poison ivy. The root issue of so much of this unrest that we've had this year, the root issue is a lack of discipleship, a lack of mission, a lack of evangelism, a lack of faith in God, and all of that comes back to God's people not caring what God says and not being students of His Word. That's an issue. You go back there, you start addressing, that's a systemic issue.
Mm-hmm.
When people begin to be students of Scripture and believe the gospel, process, believe, preach the gospel to themselves, share the gospel with others, that, racial reconciliation happens a lot faster and a lot more whole when that is a part of the answer to social injustice, racial tension, and hatred. That's how you're going to see the change. And I don't think you're going to see it through government, politics, money. I don't think you're going to see it through any other way. I do think education is a significant part that needs to be addressed in the division within race in all of our cities.
Yeah.
Lack of knowledge and why that's the case. But man, yeah, sorry to kind of go off on that soapbox as much as I did, but it's horrific, the amount of pastors. It's terrifying, the amount of pastors that I talk to personally. And I know that you could take that as a poll for the rest of the pastors in America, how few pastors read the Bible. It's deeply troubling. And if the pastor doesn't read the Bible, if the pastor doesn't pray, remember the Titans line, attitude reflects leadership, captain. Right? Mm-hmm. When Gary Bashir said that back to Julius, the black linebacker, in that movie with Denzel Washington. The people, the parishioners follow the pastor, the sheep follow the shepherd. And so when our shepherds become men of prayer and men of God's word, hungry for His word, devoted to His word, whether they like it that day or not, whether it moves them or not, but they're in it. They're dedicated their life. This is good for me. When they have that mentality, that trickles down and it begins to shape and inform the whole church. And if all our churches are being shaped that way, man, that addresses so many other issues.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we're just asking them to pretend to live in such a way that it's as if they were reading the Bible. So I want you to give financially. I want you to serve. I want you to share with others the gospel. I want you to go do these things. And that's having them act without the humble disposition to God's word, asking Him to speak to them through this time. Being students, it doesn't take writing out, for 4 hours of devotional. Giving your time, it needs to be systematic. But systematic time in Scripture that might cost you some things. So sacrificial, meaning you might need to go to bed earlier, get up earlier, but something that costs you something. Sacrificial, systematic. And I think along the way, you will experience joy. Like since January 1st, 2014, I've read through the Bible each year. And before that, I was sporadic, hit and miss, much more miss than hit. But I've learned along the way to like the Bible. And I don't know that a lot of our people have been challenged to persevere with it until they like it. First time I had bourbon, I didn't like it. It was strange. First time I had black coffee, I didn't like it. It was strange. First time you have black tea, if you're from the South, it's really strange. Or unsweetened tea. You don't like it. It's strange. But you can persist with something long enough to enjoy it. You said something earlier about acquiring a taste for something. I forget what we were talking about, but you acquired a taste for
Kombucha.
Some people, like I remember all my pastor buddies talking about IPAs, double IPAs and all that stuff. And I drank it. I felt like I was eating wildflowers. It's awful. But then I was like, you know what? I don't like missing out. I like being a part of the group. And you know what? I'm going to forget the ultra, and I'm going to go for a double IPA. And so what I did is I started asking the server, like, will you give me the most repulsive and violent IPA that you have? Like, I want it to like make me sick. If you can just give me the most repulsive, aggressive, all these adjectives. And I began to develop a palate and a taste for it. Now it's my preferred. It's like everything else tastes like a LaCroix, like a bubbly, sparkling water. And I appreciate it now. But I think a lot of people, if it's not like fireworks and fantasy and warm and fuzzy every day, they just they don't develop and develop the palate. Mm-hmm. They don't stick with it long enough to find joy there. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's like it would be great if we started riding a bike the first time we touched a bike, but it took scabbed knees, took tears, running in the ditches. I always aimed for the bushes. It was the most forgiving thing in our yard to crash into. Usually kept the bike upright for me to step off of it instead of the pavement. But man, there was something about wanting to learn how to ride that bike that kept you coming back, even with blood dripping down to your sock. Mm-hmm. You just wanted to ride it. And I feel like our people, they're expecting to develop a palate from the very beginning. And if they ever get a bad taste of it at all, one, if it seems boring, two, if it asks them to do something that they don't want to do, or they disagree with it because culture says something different, they're off. They don't touch it anymore. It's like, oh man, it's so much fun to ride bikes with your friends. Mm. It's so much fun to know the God who created everything. Mm-hmm. If you just take time and commit that. So that, I think, by far is the greatest. As a pastor, as a Christian, as a daddy, even wanting to see these things in my kids' lives. If my kids are reading the Bible every day, there's a lot I don't have to worry about. But that's a big concern if they're not. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like a lot flows from that. Yeah. But that's by far the biggest issue, I think, facing us as Christians, facing us as pastors, people.
Yep. I don't think I'm going to be able to add to that. Thank you. I think that's probably a big
soapbox.
That's pretty good conclusion right there. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming by, man. Yeah. This was fantastic. It was great to see you again.
You too, man.
It was good to catch up. I'm feeling encouraged and inspired, and I mean, maybe the next one won't be 3 years out. So maybe it'll be a little sooner than that this time. But thank you so much.
Yeah, you mentioned marijuana, cannabis.
Yeah.
We were talking about that. You emailed me earlier.
Yes.
One quick thought, because you brought up tobacco too.
Yep.
So I read this morning on the Science Times. I read the New York Times each morning. The Science Times this morning, page, I think it was D7, under the health and wellness section of the Science Times portion of the paper. There's an article on marijuana and how it is 5 times, it causes oxygen to be deprived to your bloodstream 5 times worse than tobacco. So just a thought. I know we're talking about oxygen with COVID getting into our bloodstream, trying to keep that. There's a new study that says that cannabis, marijuana, restricts oxygen 5 times the rate of oxygen getting to your bloodstream.
Can you pull that up, Andrew? Google it.
5 times worse.
That's
than
interesting.
tobacco.
So, for the listeners that are wondering, where did where did marijuana come out of? As it becomes increasingly legal in states across the country, I feel like churches are going to have to start dealing with this, right? In a way that maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago didn't have to so much. I mean, I think there's kind of one aspect from should we enjoy cannabis, should we not, where it's like, well, is it legal? You know what I mean? Now, the legal thing also, that argument gets a little funky too because it's still illegal federally. So even like Colorado, like if Access Church was in Colorado, it's legal in that state, but it's still illegal federally. So now what do you like now? Does it fall to the people to use it if it's helpful or not? Because it's legal there, but it's still illegal federally. So the legal thing, it gets a little, it's still a little bit complicated. And then like in Nashville, I don't know if you knew this, but in this summer, the prosecutor in Nashville said they're not going to prosecute anyone for low levels of marijuana possession. So it's illegal federally, it's illegal in the state. But in Davidson County, you can't get in trouble for it. So is it legal or isn't it? You know what I mean? It's this complicated thing. I'm just sort of curious as like this becomes more mainstream. Here's what I think, and you can disagree with me, or plenty of people can disagree with me. I sort of feel like it's the next alcohol. Whereas 20 years ago, a lot of people were
I could definitely see that.
teetotalers and didn't get into it, and everyone poo-pooed it. And if we'd have had, you throw a pastor and a random business guy on a podcast 30 years ago, probably most of the time it's like, to stay away from alcohol. And I think plenty of people still feel that way with marijuana, which they have a right to their own opinion. I'm totally open to that. I just sort of feel like, I'm hearing a lot of people talk about it, to be quite frank. And I feel like it's already way more common and popular and maybe even helpful, although some would disagree with me on that front, than maybe some people already realize. And I feel like it's kind of going to run through the church, maybe potentially, I could be wrong, like alcohol did, where it's like, first, no, that's crazy, don't do that. And then, maybe sometimes as science comes out and whatnot, and then I think where alcohol is kind of wound up, it's like, well, or at least, how we would think about alcohol is plenty of people don't drink, and that's totally fine. I have no problem with that. And then there's, maybe it's okay to have a drink, So I'm just kind of curious how pastors are starting to think about marijuana as it kind of becomes legal in different states. So, but you're saying, though, that you read a study. Did you find it, Andrew? Or no? Possibly. Okay. You read a study that said that marijuana, the smoking weed, is 5 times...
It prohibits the amount of oxygen to the bloodstream.
Okay.
5 times
more than tobacco.
Amount of tobacco. Absolutely, yeah. That's what the article said.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was in today's New York Times.
Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah. I have not... here we go. Wait, is it? No. Which is Heart on the Heart? Well, if you have... Can you text us that article later, maybe?
Yeah. And you can maybe look up New York Times, wellness, marijuana, tobacco, and see what pops up there.
What's funny about you mentioning that is just this past weekend, there was a guy, it's not the guy I was talking about hiking with, but someone else who was saying that he said that smoking tobacco is, what did he say? He said it's twice as bad. He said smoking marijuana is twice as bad if you was tobacco. And I was just like, dude, stop it. It's not true. You know what I mean? Like if you don't want to smoke pot because of a whole ton of reasons, that's fine. But don't say it's twice as bad if you was smoking tobacco.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just not, he seemed pretty solid on his information, but, all right, what is this? Compared with tobacco, marijuana smoking causes a 5-fold greater impairment of the blood's oxygen carrying capacity. Dr. Kaye and colleagues reported in a review of medical evidence published in January in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, researchers described a broad range of risks to the heart and blood vessels associated with the use of marijuana. Interesting.
Yeah.
Point out that marijuana is becoming increasingly potent, and smoking marijuana carries many of the same cardiovascular health hazards as smoking tobacco.
And that's what it was talking about. The
Interesting.
articles about like the cardiovascular aspects of like an athlete. If you're trying to get in shape, you're trying to run, smoking cigarettes is probably not the best way to help that.
Yeah.
Because it does limit it does many things. Your picture of the lungs shows what it does, but it deprives the blood of oxygen. And they're saying that marijuana does 5 times that.
That's really interesting. I'd love to read that because
there's a number of athletes that have openly used marijuana.
A number of athletes, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know if this is something I should say out loud, but I mean, I guess I'll just say it. But like the best athletes at my gym, they use pot.
Sure, yeah,
and they smoke it. And I mean, these are guys that these are finely tuned, like they would never smoke cigarettes. Let me just put it that way. You know what I mean? Like they wouldn't touch cigarettes.
Until they find out this research.
Yeah, maybe they're just uneducated. You know, but that's fascinating.
This is one of those places. I guess again, bookending our time, maybe going back to self-control. Is I think it's an issue that you have to address with not necessarily a right or wrong. Mm-hmm. So, I think you're right. We're going to come to a place where many are going to view it as right. And even legally, it's going to be acceptable. And so right or wrong is going to be hard to stand on, kind of like what we got with alcohol. Mm-hmm. And so that right or wrong is a knowledge issue. But a wisdom says, but is it best? And so that's where it's going to, you're going to have to ask yourself, is it best? Mm-hmm. If I'm trying to get in shape, is something like cigarettes or smoking pot, is that best? Mm-hmm. Well, then is there other ways of getting it? So like why? Like what's the purpose?
Yeah.
And you've got the guys who are like, well, God made it, it's got to be good. It's like, well, he also made poison ivy, but you don't necessarily want to sleep in it.
Yeah.
So just because it's there doesn't mean it's for our consumption.
Yes.
But I know there's many that say it's helped them, to take the medicinal route. Others, it's harmed them and made things much more difficult for them. Of course, there's an argument of the gateway that you start here and you go elsewhere. And I heard that even with alcohol in that way. But, I think at the end of the day, for Christians, the question has got to be, does this hinder my holiness? Mm-hmm. If it's all legalized, then it's no longer a legal issue. It becomes somewhat of a moral issue in how you interpret Scripture in regards to this. And so I think you get to the point, because it doesn't talk about weed in the Bible, but you just have to say, what, does this aid me in my holiness? Does this assist my holiness, or does it hinder my holiness? Does this, if it's legalized and if there's nothing legally wrong with it, if it doesn't harm you physically, okay? If we know that it doesn't harm you physically, so perhaps the word moderation is there, the term, because alcohol harms you physically if you don't use moderation. Mm-hmm. So if we're thinking of it in that same line as just another substance, then the question would be, does it aid or hinder my holiness? And that's going to be different for different contexts. Yeah. Just like it is with alcohol.
Yes.
It might not be best for you to order that drink when you're in a given situation because of the weaker brother.
Exactly.
Perhaps, or the context. So let it be a sanctifying thing for you not to order.
Yep.
Yep. That's okay.
Yep.
You're a big boy. You can drink later if you want to. Hit up the gas station on the way home if you need to.
Yeah.
But again, it's like if you're that desperate for it, that's not.
Then there's that question too. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And so it's just, it's a heart thing.
Yeah.
Again, kind of going back to where we started.
Yep. I totally agree with that. And I think another helpful way to think about it is the best thing. I get that argument and I agree with it. And then also if we term it in terms of, is it helpful? I think that can be helpful too, because for, I don't know, I guess a lot of people probably marijuana is probably not helpful. And then there's some people where studies are showing where it is helpful if you're dealing with particular, I guess, well, it seems to be better to use as a pain reliever than like getting hooked on opioids, or there can be some benefits with anxiety or depression and some of those types of things. And so, but if it's not helpful to you, or it's going to be detrimental because you start to act a certain way or do certain things, that it causes you to do that are not beneficial or holy or godly, or takes you on a good path, well then then at that point it doesn't really matter whether it's pot or alcohol or then let's not do that.
Right.
So I've just been curious, and I did want to ask you about it just because as it becomes it's talked about more and it's becoming legal in more states, I'd love to talk to a pastor in a state where it's like was once illegal and is now legal. Like,
Right,
how are they
yeah.
working through that? How are they thinking about it? How prevalent is it in their congregation? And I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to ask you about it because it's not legal in Tennessee, but you're also pastoring a church in downtown Nashville. Nashville's
Right.
a booming city, and it's here and people are using it.
There's a lot of weed in Nashville.
Yeah, there sure is. Yeah. So I was just curious how you thought through that. So yeah, that is helpful.
Yeah.
Andrew, can you text that article to me? I'd love to read that. Well, great. Well, Jeremy, thank you again for coming by. Anything else? We cover it for now.
So, man. I think we're good. Thanks for having me, man. It's
Yeah.
really good catching up.
It has been good catching up. Thank you for your time. And just so you know, Access Church pops up a fair bit at Emmanuel. Yeah, we thank you guys a lot. And
really encouraging,
so
man.
we're so happy that you're here in the city and heard the church is doing well. Hope you're doing well. So keep it up, brother.
Thank you
Keep
so much,
preaching
man.
and pastoring and spreading the love of Jesus.
Deeply encouraging, man. Thank you.
Yeah,
Really.
thank you.
Absolutely.
That was fun.